The morning sun rose gently over the quiet town of Enugu, painting the red roofs of the neighborhood with a warm golden glow. Roosters crowed from nearby compounds, traders arranged their goods by the roadside, and buses honked as they carried workers into the city. It was another ordinary day for most people. For Emeka Okafor and his wife, Kayamika, it was the day that would change the course of their lives forever. Their small one-bedroom apartment sat at the end of a dusty street. The walls were cracked in several places, the roof leaked whenever it rained, and the furniture was old enough to have been repaired more times than either of them could remember. Yet anyone who stepped inside would immediately notice something that many wealthy homes lacked. There was peace, there was laughter, and above all there was love. Kayamika stood by the tiny stove, preparing pap and akara for breakfast while softly humming one of her favorite church songs. She had always believed that no matter how difficult life became, gratitude was the key to surviving it. Emeka walked into the kitchen wearing his neatly ironed but faded shirt. As a secondary school teacher, he earned very little, but he never complained. Teaching was more than a job to him. It was a calling. Seeing his students succeed brought him joy, even if his own pockets remained empty. He wrapped his arms around Kayamika from behind. "You woke up before me again," he said with a smile. She laughed. "If I waited for you, we would both leave the house hungry." He kissed her forehead. "I married the hardest working woman in Nigeria, and I married the most stubborn man in Nigeria." They both laughed. Moments like these made poverty feel smaller than it really was. After breakfast, Kayamika carefully opened her laptop. It was an old second-hand computer that often froze without warning. She refreshed her email for what felt like the 100th time that week. Nothing. She sighed heavily. "You've been checking since 5 this morning," Emeka said gently. "I know. You'll hear from them." "I hope so." Months earlier, Kayamika had applied for a master's degree in business management at one of the most respected universities in the United States. She had almost forgotten about the application because she never expected to be accepted. The competition had been fierce. Thousands had applied. Only a few would be chosen. Suddenly, the computer made a soft notification sound. A new email had arrived. Her hands froze. She stared at the screen without moving. "What is it?" Emeka asked. I don't know." "Open it." She slowly clicked the email. For several seconds, neither of them spoke. Then Kayamika covered her mouth with both hands. Tears immediately filled her eyes. "What happened?" Emeka asked, his heart racing. She turned the laptop toward him. Across the screen were the words she had dreamed about for years. "Congratulations. We are pleased to offer you admission." Emeka read the letter twice before looking back at her. "You got in." She nodded, unable to speak. "You actually got in." He lifted her off the ground and spun her around the tiny room while both of them laughed and cried at the same time. Neighbors peeped through their windows after hearing the excitement. "What happened? Did they win the lottery?" Someone shouted from outside. Emeka opened the door with the biggest smile anyone had ever seen. "My wife is going to America." The neighbors clapped politely, but after congratulating them, many exchanged doubtful glances. One elderly woman whispered to another, "They're celebrating too early." Another replied, "Admission is one thing, paying for it is another." The excitement inside the house slowly faded as reality settled in. Kayamika continued reading the email. Her smile disappeared. "What is it?" Emeka asked. She handed him the document. He carefully read the estimated expenses: tuition, accommodation, visa fees, health insurance, airfare, living expenses. By the time he reached the bottom of the page, his face had become serious. The amount was more money than both of them could earn in many years. Silence filled the room. Finally, Kayamika closed the laptop. "I guess that's the end of the dream." Emeka looked at her. "What do you mean?" "We can't afford this. We'll find a way." She forced a smile. "No, Emeka. We will." She shook her head. "I don't want us to spend the rest of our lives paying debts. This opportunity may never come again." "I know. I won't let you lose it." She reached for his hand. You've already done enough for me. He squeezed her fingers. I haven't done anything yet. Over the following weeks, they searched everywhere for financial help. They visited banks. Every application was rejected. They met relatives. Everyone had an excuse. We're struggling too. Maybe next year. America isn't for people like us. Some even laughed openly. One uncle leaned back in his chair and said, If she is meant to go abroad, God will provide. Emeka replied politely, Maybe God wants to provide through people. The uncle simply shrugged. Nothing came. Every door closed. One evening they sat outside their apartment watching children play football on the dusty road. Neither of them spoke for a long time. Finally Kayamika broke the silence. I'm giving up. No. It's over. No. There is no money. There will be. She looked at him carefully. What are you planning? He smiled. You'll see. The following morning, Emeka woke before sunrise. Without telling Kayamika where he was going, he rode his old motorcycle into town. By afternoon, he returned home walking. The motorcycle was gone. She rushed outside. Where is your bike? I sold it. You what? It was a good price. Emeka, we need money. That motorcycle takes you to work. I can use buses. She stared at him in disbelief. You didn't even tell me. If I had told you, you would have stopped me. She couldn't argue with that. A week later, another buyer arrived. This time, they carried away the small neighborhood shop that Emeka had inherited from his late father. The shop had provided extra income for years. Watching strangers empty it felt like watching part of their history disappear. Again, Kayamika protested. You can't keep selling everything. I can. What will we have left? He smiled. You. She burst into tears. I don't want this. I do. Why? Because one day we'll laugh about this. The sales continued. Their television, the refrigerator, the dining table, the sofa, the wardrobe. Neighbors gathered outside almost every day to watch. The gossip spread quickly. He's selling his entire life. That woman has bewitched him. She'll travel and marry a white man. He'll die alone. One afternoon, Emeka overheard two men laughing as he loaded furniture into a buyer's truck. The first man said loudly, He's the biggest fool in Enugu. The second laughed. When she becomes rich, she'll pretend she never knew him. Emeka calmly continued working. When the truck drove away, one of the men walked over. Doesn't it bother you? What? What people are saying? Emeka smiled. No. You really trust her that much? With my life. The man shook his head. You're too innocent. Maybe. But I'd rather trust the woman I love than spend my life suspecting her. The man had no answer. A month later, only one valuable possession remained. A small piece of farmland inherited from Emeka's father. It was the only inheritance his family had left him. His late father had often said, No matter how hard life becomes, never sell this land. When Emeka mentioned selling it, his older cousin became furious. You've lost your mind. It will help Kayamika. It is your father's legacy. My wife is my future. Your father would be disappointed. Emeka looked toward the farmland stretching across the distance. My father always wanted me to build a better life. His cousin folded his arms. And if she never comes back? Emeka answered without hesitation. Then I'll still be proud that I helped her become who she was meant to be. Within days, the land was sold. The money completed the amount Kayamika needed. When she discovered what he had done, she cried harder than she ever had before. She held his face in both hands. You've sacrificed everything. He smiled gently. No, Emeka. I haven't sacrificed everything. What else is left? I still have my faith. He touched her wedding ring. And I still have you. The weeks passed quickly. Soon her visa was approved. The flight was booked. Departure day arrived. At Akanu Ibiam International Airport, emotions overwhelmed them. Family members came to say goodbye, though some secretly believed they would never see Kayamika as Emeka's wife again. As boarding was announced, Emeka handed her a small brown envelope. "What is this?" "Open it after the plane takes off." She hugged him tightly. Neither wanted to let go. Finally, he whispered into her ear, "I have only one request." She looked into his eyes. "Anything. No matter what happens. No matter what anyone tells you. Never stop believing in us." Fresh tears rolled down her cheeks. "I promise. You'll chase your dreams. And you'll wait for me?" "I'll wait for the rest of my life if I have to." She kissed him. "I'll come back. You don't have to come back rich. I know. You just have to come back." She nodded, unable to speak. As she disappeared through the departure gate, Emeka remained standing behind the glass wall until the plane finally lifted into the sky. Only then did he allow himself to cry. Hours later, high above the Atlantic Ocean, Kayamika remembered the envelope. She opened it carefully. Inside was a handwritten letter. It read, "My dearest Kayamika, by the time you read this, you will already be flying toward the future we have prayed for. I know there will be days when you feel lonely, tired, or afraid. On those days, remember this. Somewhere in Nigeria, there is a man who believes in you more than he believes in himself. Don't worry about what I gave up. Houses can be rebuilt. Land can be bought again. Furniture can be replaced. But opportunities like this come only once. Promise me that when success comes, you will stay the kind-hearted woman I fell in love with. Money should change your circumstances, not your heart. No matter how long you're away, I will be here cheering for you. I will pray for you every morning and every night. I know you will make me proud, but more importantly, I know you will make yourself proud. Go and conquer the world, my love. I'll be waiting at home when you return. Forever yours, Emeka." By the time she finished reading, tears blurred every word on the page. She pressed the letter against her chest and looked out of the airplane window into the endless clouds. At that moment, she made herself a silent promise. No matter how successful she became, no matter how much money she earned, she would never forget the man who had sold everything he owned so she could chase a dream that had once seemed impossible. She had no way of knowing that the greatest threat to that promise would not come from distance, wealth, or time, but from the poisonous lies of the people she trusted most. The roar of the airplane engines slowly faded as the aircraft landed at John F. Kennedy International Airport in New York. Kayamika pressed her forehead against the window and stared at the endless rows of airplanes, towering buildings in the distance, and flashing runway lights. Everything looked so different from Nigeria. Even the air seemed different. Her heart pounded with excitement and fear. "This is it," she whispered to herself. "A new beginning." As passengers stood to collect their luggage, she reached into her handbag and touched the folded letter Emeka had written to her before she left Nigeria. She had already read it more than 10 times during the flight. Every time she felt afraid, she read it again. It reminded her why she had come. Not for luxury, not for fame, but to honor the greatest sacrifice anyone had ever made for her. The first few days in America felt like she had been dropped into another world. The streets were enormous. Cars moved in perfect lanes. People walked so fast that no one seemed to notice anyone else. Everyone appeared busy. Everyone had somewhere to be. The university campus was breathtaking. Tall glass buildings reflected the morning sun. Students from every race and nationality filled the walkways carrying laptops, coffee cups, and backpacks. Kayamika smiled as she looked around. She had dreamed about this moment for years. Now she was finally living it. But dreams, she soon discovered, came with bills. After paying tuition and moving into a tiny shared apartment with 3 other international students, very little money remained. Her room was barely large enough for a single bed and a small desk. The heating system worked only when it wanted to. The refrigerator was shared. The bathroom was shared. Privacy no longer existed. Still, she reminded herself daily, this is temporary. On her 3rd day, she called Emeka. The moment his face appeared on the screen, she burst into tears. Emeka laughed softly. "You've only been gone 3 days. I miss you. I miss you too. I don't like it here. You've not even started classes. I know. It will get better. She smiled through her tears. You always say that. Because it always does. She shook her head. I wish you were here. So do I. He held up a bowl of noodles. See what I cooked. She laughed. You'll poison yourself. I survived. Barely. For almost an hour they talked about everything. The apartment, the university, the weather, the strange food, the people. By the time they ended the call, Kayamika felt stronger. It became their daily routine. Every morning before Emika left for work, he called her. Every evening before she went to bed, she called him. No matter how busy they became, they always made time for each other. Classes began the following week. The professors moved quickly. Assignments came one after another. Case studies, presentations, research papers, group projects. Many of her classmates had studied in expensive private schools. Some came from wealthy families. Others already owned businesses. At first, Kayamika struggled to keep up. English was not the problem. The speed was. Everything happened so fast. Sometimes she stayed in the library until midnight trying to understand concepts everyone else seemed to grasp immediately. She often remembered something Emika used to tell her. Don't compare your beginning to someone else's middle. Whenever she felt discouraged, she repeated those words. Little by little, things began making sense. Money, however, became a bigger problem. The savings they had worked so hard to gather disappeared faster than expected. Rent, books, transportation, food, unexpected fees. Everything cost more than she imagined. One afternoon she looked at her bank account. The balance made her stomach tighten. If she didn't find work soon, she would not survive the semester. She spent days searching. Restaurant after restaurant rejected her. No experience. Not hiring. Come back next month. Finally, a small diner offered her a job washing dishes. The pay was low. The hours were terrible. But she accepted immediately. Her shift began every evening at 6. By midnight, her hands were wrinkled from hot water and soap. Plates, pots, pans, endless dishes. Sometimes customers left mountains of dirty plates after large family dinners. She washed until her shoulders burned. The restaurant manager, Mr. Hernandez, noticed she never complained. You smile even when you're exhausted. She smiled again. In my country, we say complaining doesn't finish the work. He laughed. I like that. Life settled into an exhausting routine. Wake up at 6. Attend lectures until afternoon. Study in the library. Go to work. Return home after midnight. Sleep for 4 or 5 hours. Repeat. Some nights she fell asleep while reading textbooks. Other mornings she woke up with notes stuck to her face. Her roommates joked that she studied even in her dreams. Winter arrived. It was the first time Kayamika had ever seen snow. At first she thought it was beautiful. Tiny white flakes floated gently from the sky. Within days she hated it. The freezing temperatures made walking to class painful. Her fingers became numb. Her lips cracked. The wind felt like tiny knives cutting through her jacket. She called Emika one evening while shivering. I don't think human beings were created to live in this weather. He laughed loudly. I told you to carry the thicker jacket. You also said it wouldn't be that cold. I was encouraging you. She rolled her eyes. You lied. I motivated you. They both laughed until neither could breathe. Moments like those reminded her that although thousands of miles separated them, they were still a team. Months passed. Then one afternoon disaster struck. The restaurant reduced staff because business had slowed. Several employees lost their jobs. Kayamika was one of them. She walked back to her apartment carrying a small envelope containing her final paycheck. The tears started before she reached home. She had rent due in 2 weeks. Her textbooks still needed to be paid for. She had almost nothing left. That evening she called Emika. He immediately noticed something was wrong. What happened? I lost my job. Silence. Then he smiled gently. Is that all? She stared at him. Is that all? We'll figure it out. I don't know how. You've overcome bigger problems. I feel like I'm failing. You are not failing. I can't even pay my bills. He leaned closer to the camera. Listen to me carefully. She wiped her eyes. When we started this journey, did we expect it to be easy? No. Did we know there would be problems? Yes. So why are you surprised? She laughed weakly. I don't know. You didn't cross an ocean to give up because of one job. His confidence became her strength once again. The next morning she resumed searching. After nearly 3 weeks, she found another opportunity. A cleaning company needed night workers to clean office buildings after employees went home. The work was harder than washing dishes. She vacuumed carpets, cleaned windows, scrubbed toilets, emptied trash bins. Some nights she worked inside luxury offices overlooking the city skyline. She often paused for a few seconds beside the giant windows. Far below, expensive cars moved through brightly lit streets. She wondered what it would feel like to work in one of those offices instead of cleaning them. Then she smiled. One day, during her second semester, one of her professors assigned students to develop business plans for solving real-world problems. While most students chose ordinary ideas, Kayamika focused on something close to her heart. She designed a technology platform that would help small African businesses connect directly with international buyers. She remembered how difficult it had been for talented people back home to reach larger markets. If they could sell globally, many families could escape poverty. Her professor was impressed. This idea has real potential. Those words stayed with her. Determined to improve it, Kayamika spent every spare minute researching. She attended free business seminars. She watched online lectures. She interviewed entrepreneurs. She entered startup competitions, even though she rarely won. Every rejection became another lesson. Instead of feeling discouraged, she asked judges one question every time. What could I improve? Most contestants walked away after losing. Kayamika stayed behind taking notes. Slowly, her presentations improved. Her confidence grew. Meanwhile, Emeka remained her biggest supporter. Even though life in Nigeria had become more difficult after selling nearly everything, he never allowed her to know how much he struggled. He continued teaching during the day. In the evenings, he took private lessons to earn extra income. Sometimes he skipped meals so he could save enough money to send her a little support. Whenever he transferred money, he wrote the same message. For my future billionaire. She always laughed. You keep calling me that. Because I can already see it. I don't even have enough money for groceries. Temporary. I clean toilets. Temporary. My shoes have holes. Temporary. She smiled every time. You always say temporary. Because your future is permanent. Those conversations became the fuel that kept her moving. 3 years passed. Kayamika graduated at the top of her class. As she walked across the stage in her graduation gown, she searched the crowd instinctively. She knew Emeka could not afford to travel to America. Still, she imagined him sitting there, smiling proudly. When her name was announced as one of the best graduating students, the audience applauded loudly. She closed her eyes for a brief moment. This is for you, Emeka. That evening she video called him. Instead of speaking, she simply held up her degree certificate. Emeka clapped so hard that neighbors came to see what was happening. My wife did it, he shouted. Our sacrifice wasn't in vain. The neighbors congratulated him. But when the call ended and he returned to his small rented room, tears quietly rolled down his face. He looked around the nearly empty room. No furniture, no television, no motorcycle, no family inheritance. Nothing remained except a mattress, a few clothes, and hope. Yet he smiled. If I had to sell everything again, he whispered, I would. Graduation opened new doors. One afternoon, the university hosted a prestigious startup competition where young entrepreneurs pitched their ideas to investors from across America. The grand auditorium was filled with successful business owners, venture capitalists, and executives searching for promising innovations. Kayamika almost didn't attend. She believed her idea still wasn't good enough. But Grace, a close friend she had made during her final year, refused to let her stay home. You've worked on this business plan for years, Grace said. If you don't present it, someone else will. What if I fail? Grace smiled. Then you'll learn. And if they laugh? They won't. And if they reject me? Then you'll come back stronger. Kayamika took a deep breath. You make everything sound easy. No, Grace replied with a grin. I just believe in you. Those words reminded Kayamika so much of Emeka that she couldn't help smiling. She walked onto the stage with trembling hands, unaware that somewhere in the audience sat one of America's most respected investors, a billionaire businessman named Robert Williams. Within the next hour, a single presentation would change the course of her life forever. The woman who had once scrubbed office floors to survive was about to step into a room where destiny was waiting. The grand ballroom of the Manhattan Grand Hotel sparkled beneath crystal chandeliers as hundreds of guests applauded. Television cameras flashed from every corner while journalists hurried to capture reactions from some of the world's most successful entrepreneurs. Standing confidently on the stage, dressed in an elegant navy blue suit, Kayamika Okafor smiled as she accepted the Global Innovation Award, an honor given to business leaders whose companies had transformed lives across continents. Just 6 years earlier, she had scrubbed office floors at midnight to pay her rent. Now, she owned a technology company valued at billions of dollars. The applause grew louder as the host handed her the microphone. What inspired you to build a company that connects thousands of African businesses with buyers around the world? He asked. Kayamika smiled warmly. My husband. The audience became quiet. She continued. When everyone else saw limitations, he saw possibilities. He sold everything he owned so I could come to America and chase a dream that even I was afraid to believe in. Every success I've achieved belongs to both of us. The audience rose to its feet. Many people wiped tears from their eyes. Watching from his tiny rented apartment in Enugu through an old neighbor's television, Emeka smiled proudly. My wife, he whispered. Even after all these years, hearing her publicly acknowledge him filled his heart with joy. The neighbor patted him on the shoulder. You chose well. Emeka nodded. I've always known. As Kayamika's success grew, so did the attention surrounding her. Newspapers wanted interviews. Universities invited her to speak. Television stations featured her inspiring journey. Magazine covers called her the African billionaire who changed global trade. Investors lined up outside her office. Governments requested partnerships. Her calendar became so full that her assistant often scheduled meetings months in advance. Despite the overwhelming workload, Kayamika never forgot the promise she had made on the airplane years ago. Every evening, no matter how exhausted she felt, she called Emeka. Sometimes the conversations lasted an hour, sometimes only 15 minutes. But hearing his voice remained the best part of her day. One evening she called while sitting alone in her luxurious penthouse overlooking the New York skyline. What are you doing? She asked. Emeka laughed. Trying to cook jollof rice. She smiled. Trying? The pot has already defeated me. You burned it again? I prefer to say it developed extra flavor. She burst into laughter. You'll never change. I hope not. They talked until midnight. Before ending the call, Emeka said softly, I'm proud of you. She smiled. I couldn't have done it without you. I only opened the door. You built the courage to walk through it. She touched the wedding ring on her finger after the call ended. Distance had separated them physically. Love had not. Thousands of miles away in Nigeria, however, another emotion was beginning to grow. Jealousy. The Okafor family compound, once filled with relatives who rarely spoke to Kayamika, suddenly became unusually lively. Every newspaper article about her success made headlines across the country. Every television interview reminded people that one of their own had become one of the richest women in America. Neighbors admired her. The community celebrated her. But inside her own family, admiration slowly turned into envy. One afternoon, Kayamika's mother, Mama Ngozi, sat on her veranda reading another newspaper featuring her daughter's smiling face. Her older son, Uche, walked in carrying groceries. He glanced at the front page. There she is again. Mama Ngozi sighed. She's becoming more famous every day. Uche frowned. Do you know what annoys me? What? Everyone acts as if Emeka deserves the credit. Mama Ngozi folded the newspaper. People keep saying he sacrificed everything. He sold one piece of land and a motorcycle. It was more than that. So what? Uche's voice became colder. Now she's worth billions. Mama Ngozi looked toward the road. Have you noticed something? What? She sends Emeka money every month. So? But whenever we ask for help, she asks questions. Uche smirked. I've noticed. Their cousin Ada, who had been quietly listening from the doorway, joined the conversation. She trusts Emeka more than all of us. Silence filled the room. Then Uche smiled. A slow, dangerous smile. Maybe that's the problem. Several weeks later, Kayamika called her mother as usual. How are you, Mama? I'm fine, my daughter. How's everyone at home? We're all fine. They chatted about family matters for several minutes before Mama Ngozi hesitated. There is something I've been wondering. What is it? I don't know whether I should tell you. Kayamika immediately became concerned. Mama, what happened? It's about Emeka. Her smile faded. What about him? Oh. Maybe I shouldn't say anything. Mama, I don't want to destroy your happiness. Kayamika sat upright. Please tell me. There was a long pause. I've seen him talking to another woman almost every evening. Kayamika frowned. Talking. Very closely. Her heart skipped. But maybe they're just friends. I hope so. Mama Ngozi quickly changed the subject. I'll pray everything is okay. After ending the call, Kayamika stared at her phone. She wanted to laugh at how ridiculous the suggestion sounded. Emeka, the man who had sacrificed everything? Impossible. She dismissed the thought immediately. When Emeka called that night, she almost mentioned it. Instead, she decided not to. There is no point asking him about nonsense, she told herself. A month later, her brother Uche called. He sounded unusually serious. Sister, what happened? I've been thinking. About what? Emeka. Again. She sighed. What about him? I saw him entering a restaurant. So? He wasn't alone. Her heartbeat slowed. Who was with him? A young woman. Kayamika smiled. Maybe she was one of his students. I don't think teachers hold hands with students. Her smile disappeared. What? They looked close. Silence. Uche quickly added, I didn't want to tell you. Are you sure? I wish I wasn't. After hanging up, Kayamika remained seated for several minutes. For the first time, a tiny seed of doubt entered her mind. That evening, Emeka called. He was smiling as always. I have good news. What is it? I finally repaired the leaking roof. Oh, you don't sound excited. I'm tired. Long day. Very. He noticed something was wrong. Is everything okay? Yes. Are you sure? Of course. They spoke for only 10 minutes before ending the call. Afterward, Emeka looked at the phone. She sounds stressed, he whispered. He blamed her busy schedule. He had no idea something far more dangerous had entered their marriage. The lies continued. Each call from Nigeria carried another story. Ada called next. I almost didn't recognize Emeka yesterday. What happened? He bought expensive clothes. So? I thought you said he wasn't working much. He isn't. Then where is the money coming from? Kayamika frowned. I don't know. Ada sighed dramatically. I hope he isn't spending your money on another woman. Again, silence. Days later, another message arrived. This time it included photographs. Emeka standing beside an attractive woman outside a supermarket. They appeared to be smiling. The woman was holding his arm. Kayamika stared at the pictures for several minutes. Her stomach tightened. She immediately called Emeka. No answer. She called again. Still nothing. Her imagination filled the silence. She didn't know that Emeka was simply teaching a late evening lesson and had left his phone in his bag. By the time he returned her call hours later, her emotions had already taken over. Hello, my love. She sounded cold. You were busy. I was teaching. I see. Are you okay? I'm fine. He sensed the distance immediately. I've missed you. Did something happen? No. Why do you sound like this? I'm just tired. Again she said nothing. Again he believed her. The next morning she looked at the photographs once more. Something didn't feel right. The angle seemed strange. The lighting looked unusual. She almost asked Grace for her opinion. Instead, she deleted the conversation. I don't want people thinking my husband is cheating. Still, the images remained in her mind. Business responsibilities continued growing. Robert Williams promoted her to chief executive officer after the company's rapid expansion. Soon she was flying across continents almost every week. London, Dubai, Singapore, Paris, Johannesburg, Lagos. Meetings filled every hour. The time difference between America and Nigeria became harder to manage. Some nights she missed Emeka's calls because she was speaking at conferences. Other times he was asleep when she became free. The daily conversations gradually became every other day, then twice a week. Neither wanted that. Life simply became complicated. Unfortunately, her family saw opportunity. One evening, Uche visited Emeka's neighborhood. He quietly paid a local photographer. I need pictures. What kind? Pictures that tell a story. The photographer frowned. What story? The story I want. Money changed hands. Within days, carefully staged photographs began appearing. A female colleague from Emeka's school happened to greet him after work. The photographer captured the moment. Another image showed them laughing together. One picture caught her adjusting Emeka's shirt collar after he accidentally spilled food on himself during a teacher's meeting. Viewed individually, they meant nothing. Viewed together, they painted another picture. Exactly the picture Uche wanted. Meanwhile, Emeka remained completely unaware. His entire focus was surviving. Teaching no longer paid enough. He started tutoring students after school. During weekends, he marked examination papers for other schools. Every naira he earned, he saved. His dream remained unchanged. One day he would join Kayamika in America. He wanted to surprise her. Each night he calculated how much more he needed for a passport renewal and visa application. The amount seemed impossible. Still, he kept saving. Months passed. The poison spread slowly. Never enough to destroy trust immediately. Just enough to weaken it. Each conversation with her family began the same way. We don't want to worry you. We may be mistaken. Maybe we're seeing things. But always another story. Always another accusation. Always another carefully crafted lie. The consistency began wearing down Kayamika's confidence. One evening, while preparing for a major investor meeting, Grace noticed her staring blankly out of the office window. You've been distracted lately. Kayamika forced a smile. I'm okay. Grace wasn't convinced. You're carrying something. After a long silence, Kayamika finally spoke. My family thinks my husband is cheating. Grace looked surprised. What do you think? I don't know. Has he ever given you a reason not to trust him? No. Then why are you doubting him? My family wouldn't lie to me. Grace folded her arms thoughtfully. Families are made up of people. So? And people can lie. Kayamika shook her head. My mother wouldn't. Grace didn't argue further. Instead, she simply said, whatever you do, don't make decisions based on assumptions. Those words echoed in Kayamika's mind long after she left the office. She wanted to believe Emeka. She truly did. But the constant stream of accusations from the people she had trusted all her life had begun to cloud her judgment. Without realizing it, she started answering Emeka's calls less often. Their conversations became shorter. Her laughter disappeared. Questions replaced affection. Silences replaced excitement. And somewhere in Nigeria, Emeka lay awake at night staring at his phone, wondering why the woman who once couldn't wait to hear his voice now sounded as though she was speaking to a stranger. He blamed the distance. He blamed her busy career. He blamed himself for not being able to join her sooner. Never once did he imagine that the greatest threat to their marriage was not the thousands of miles between them. It was the lies being whispered into the ears of the woman he loved most by the very people she trusted with all her heart. The first time Kayamika missed their nightly call, Emeka didn't think much of it. He looked at the clock hanging on the wall of his small rented room. It was nearly midnight in Nigeria. That meant it was early evening in New York. She was probably still in a meeting. He smiled to himself and placed his phone beside his pillow. "My hard-working wife," he whispered. "She's probably building another company." He closed his eyes and went to sleep, convinced she would call the following morning. She didn't. The next day, Emeka finished teaching his classes and hurried home. The old phone in his pocket vibrated. His heart skipped. He quickly pulled it out. It wasn't Kayamika. It was a network promotional message. He laughed softly at himself. "I've become too hopeful." That evening he called her. The phone rang, then went to voicemail. He waited 15 minutes and called again. No answer. He frowned. She must be busy. He typed a message instead. "Hi, my love. I hope your meeting went well. Call me when you're free. I miss you." He smiled after sending it. Surely she would reply. She didn't. For the next several days, Emeka continued calling. Sometimes the phone rang without being answered. Sometimes it went straight to voicemail. Occasionally, she replied with a short message. "Busy. Talk later." Or, "Long day. I'll call tomorrow." Tomorrow rarely came. The long conversations that had once lasted for hours slowly disappeared. Now, when they spoke, it felt rushed, forced, different. Emeka tried to ignore the feeling growing inside him. Something wasn't right. One Saturday afternoon, he sat beneath the mango tree outside the school where he taught, marking examination papers. His colleague, Mrs. Esther, walked over carrying a bottle of water. "You've been distracted lately," she observed. Emeka looked up and smiled politely. "Have I? You marked the same paper twice." He laughed awkwardly. "I guess I'm tired." She sat beside him. "Is everything okay with your wife?" He hesitated. "I don't know." "What do you mean?" "We hardly talk anymore." Mrs. Esther frowned. "Have you asked her why?" "I have." "What did she say?" "She's busy." Esther nodded thoughtfully. "Maybe she really is." "I know. But it feels like something else." She placed a comforting hand on his shoulder. "Don't jump to conclusions." He smiled weakly. "I won't." Deep inside, however, uneasiness continued growing. Thousands of miles away, Kayamika stared at her phone as Emeka's name appeared on the screen. She hesitated, then pressed decline. Immediately afterward, guilt washed over her. She wanted to answer. She truly did. But every time she heard his voice, memories of the accusations from her family echoed in her mind. "He's always with another woman. He's wasting your money. He's pretending to love you." She rubbed her forehead. "I just need time." Instead of returning the call, she buried herself in work. Emeka noticed the pattern. Every call became shorter. Every conversation became colder. One evening he finally gathered enough courage to ask, "Kayamika, have I done something wrong?" Silence. "No. You sound different." "I'm just tired." "You've been tired for months." She sighed. "Can we not do this today?" His heart sank. "I'm only asking because I care." "I said I'm fine." Before he could say another word, she ended the call. Emeka stared at the dark phone screen for several minutes. It was the first time she had ever hung up on him. That night he couldn't sleep. He replayed every conversation they had shared over the past few months. Had he forgotten an anniversary? Had he said something hurtful? Had he become too demanding? The more he thought, the more confused he became. Finally, he got out of bed and opened the wooden box where he kept Kayamika's old letters. He slowly unfolded one she had written shortly after arriving in America. "No matter how successful I become, you will always be the greatest blessing in my life." He smiled sadly. "I know you still mean this." He folded the letter carefully. "Something is wrong." Life in Nigeria became increasingly difficult. When Emeka had sold everything to finance Kayamika's education, he believed it would only be temporary. Now, years later, he still owned almost nothing. His teacher's salary barely covered rent and food. The private tutoring jobs helped, but they weren't enough. The school where he worked announced budget cuts. Several teachers would lose their jobs. One Monday morning, the principal called him into the office. "I'm sorry, Emeka." His stomach tightened. "We can no longer afford your position." He forced a smile. "I understand. You've been an excellent teacher." "Thank you. I wish things were different." "So do I." He packed his belongings into a small cardboard box. As he walked through the school gate one final time, several students ran after him. "Sir." He turned. One little boy hugged him tightly. "Who's going to teach us mathematics now?" Emeka struggled to smile. "I'm sure your new teacher will do a wonderful job." "We don't want another teacher." Neither did he. Without steady income, paying rent became nearly impossible. He searched everywhere for work. Schools, bookstores, offices, construction companies, warehouses. Everywhere he went, the answer was the same. "We're not hiring." Weeks turned into months. His savings disappeared. One afternoon, his landlord knocked loudly on the door. "Emeka." He opened it. "Good afternoon. You owe 3 months' rent." "I know. When will you pay?" "I'm still looking for work." The landlord sighed. "I've been patient." "I appreciate that. But patience doesn't pay my bills." Emeka lowered his eyes. "Please give me a little more time." The landlord looked around the nearly empty room. There wasn't even furniture left to seize. Finally, he shook his head. "You have 1 week." That evening, Emeka called Kayamika. She didn't answer. He sent another message. "I hope you're okay. I miss hearing your voice." Hours passed. No reply. For the first time since she left Nigeria, doubt entered his heart. Not doubt about her love. Doubt about whether she was in trouble. What if she's sick? What if something happened? He wanted to fly to America immediately, but he couldn't even afford transportation across town. 1 week later, the landlord returned. "I'm sorry. So am I. You need to leave." Emeka quietly packed his few remaining clothes into an old travel bag. As he stepped outside carrying everything he owned, several neighbors watched from their windows. One elderly woman approached him. "I'm sorry, my son." He smiled politely. "God will provide." She handed him a small food container. "It's only rice." He accepted it gratefully. "Thank you." She watched him walk away. "Where will you go?" she called after him. He didn't know. For several weeks, he moved from one cheap guest house to another. Whenever he earned a little money doing temporary jobs, he paid for another night. Sometimes he slept at friends' houses. Sometimes inside church halls after evening services. He refused to tell Kayamika. He didn't want to worry her. Even now, he believed she was simply overwhelmed with work. Once things settle down, he told himself, everything will return to normal. Meanwhile, Kayamika's family continued their manipulation. Mama Ngozi called again. "I saw Emeka yesterday." "Oh." He looked very happy. Kayamika frowned. "That's good. He was with that same woman." Silence. "I don't know why he's pretending." Another lie. Another wound. Kayamika thanked her mother and ended the call. She immediately ignored the message Emeka had sent earlier that morning. Grace noticed the change. One afternoon, she entered Kayamika's office carrying coffee. "You've been avoiding your husband." "I'm busy." Grace raised an eyebrow. "You've always been busy." Kayamika looked away. "I don't know if I can trust him anymore." Grace sat opposite her. "What happened?" "My family keeps telling me he's seeing someone else." "Have you seen proof?" "There are pictures." Grace held out her hand. "Show me." Kayamika hesitated before handing over her phone. Grace studied the images carefully. After several minutes, she frowned. "These don't prove anything." "What do you mean?" One picture shows 2 people standing outside a supermarket. They're smiling. "So? They're close." Grace smiled gently. So if you and I smile together outside this building, are we having an affair? Kayamika sighed. It's not just the pictures. It's the stories. Grace leaned forward. Stories from people who benefit financially from you? Kayamika looked confused. What are you saying? I'm saying jealousy makes people do terrible things. You don't know my family. No. But I know human nature. Kayamika remained silent. She wanted to believe Grace. Instead, she believed the people she had known her entire life. Back in Nigeria, Emeka finally found work carrying cement at a construction site. The pay was poor. The work was exhausting. His soft teacher's hands soon became rough and blistered. Each evening he returned covered in dust. The younger laborers often laughed. "Oga teacher, you really came to carry blocks?" He smiled. "Work is work." One laborer asked, "Where is your wife?" "In America. And she allows you to do this?" Emeka chuckled. "She doesn't know." "Why not?" "Because she has enough to worry about." Despite everything, he never stopped calling. Birthdays, anniversaries, Christmas, New Year. He always called. Sometimes she answered briefly. Most times she didn't. Still, he refused to give up. Every unanswered call ended with another message. "I'm praying for you. I hope you ate today. Don't forget to rest. I'm proud of you." He never complained, never accused, never demanded explanations. His love remained patient. Then came the day that broke him. He dialed her number as usual. Instead of ringing, a message appeared on the screen. "This user is unavailable." Confused, he tried again. The same message. Again. The same result. He borrowed a friend's phone. The call still didn't go through. His heart began racing. Finally, he understood. She had blocked his number. He stared blankly at the screen. No! He tried sending an email. No response. A message through social media. Nothing. Another email. Silence. It felt as though the woman who had once promised never to stop believing in them had suddenly erased him from her life. That night, Emeka sat alone outside the abandoned building where he had found temporary shelter after losing even the construction job due to an injury. The city lights flickered in the distance. People walked past without noticing the lonely man sitting quietly in the darkness. For the first time since Kayamika boarded the plane to America, tears rolled freely down his face. He wasn't crying because he was poor. He wasn't crying because he had lost his job. He wasn't crying because he had no home. He cried because he couldn't understand how the woman who had once called him her greatest blessing had suddenly shut every door between them without a single explanation. Still, even with his heart shattered, he looked up at the night sky and whispered a prayer. "Lord, wherever she is, keep her safe." He paused, wiping his eyes. "And if I have done something to hurt her without knowing it, please help me make it right." Unknown to him, thousands of miles away, Kayamika also lay awake that same night, staring at the ceiling of her luxurious penthouse. She told herself she was protecting her heart. She told herself she was finally accepting the truth. But deep inside, beneath the anger and confusion, a quiet voice kept asking the same question over and over. What if everyone else is wrong? The morning sun streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows of Kayamika Okafor's penthouse overlooking Manhattan. Below, the city was already alive with honking taxis, hurried commuters, and skyscrapers that disappeared into the clouds. She stood silently by the glass, holding a cup of coffee she had barely touched. Normally, mornings filled her with excitement. Every new day brought another opportunity to expand her company, create jobs, and support businesses across Africa. But lately, something inside her felt different. The joy that once accompanied her success had begun to fade. She couldn't explain it. She had everything she had once dreamed of. A thriving business, luxury homes, private jets, recognition around the world. Yet her heart felt strangely empty. She picked up her phone. For a brief moment, her thumb hovered over Emeka's name. Then she remembered. There was no name anymore. Months earlier, she had blocked his number after another series of accusations from her family. She slowly put the phone down. "It's for the best," she whispered to herself. But even as she said the words, they sounded less convincing than before. Across the Atlantic, in Enugu, Emeka woke before sunrise. His bed was no longer a bed. It was a flattened cardboard box spread beneath an unfinished building where several homeless men slept at night. The rainy season had arrived. Water dripped steadily through the exposed concrete ceiling. Mosquitoes buzzed endlessly around them. One of the older men beside him stretched and yawned. "Morning, teacher." The nickname had followed Emeka from the construction site. Although he no longer taught in a classroom, everyone still called him teacher. "Morning," Emeka replied with a tired smile. "You slept." "A little." The older man laughed. "Nobody sleeps well here." Emeka quietly folded the blanket someone from a nearby church had donated months earlier. His stomach growled loudly. He hadn't eaten since the previous afternoon. Still, he refused to beg. Instead, he spent each morning searching for casual labor. Anything. Loading trucks, cleaning compounds, carrying blocks, digging foundations. Some days he found work. Many days he didn't. Yet every evening before sleeping, he still prayed for only one person. Kayamika. Never once did he pray for revenge. Never once did he ask God to punish her. He simply asked that she remain safe. Meanwhile, Kayamika's relatives had grown accustomed to a lifestyle they had never imagined possible. The first time Kayamika sent money after her company became profitable, it had been out of gratitude. She wanted to improve the lives of the people who had raised her. She paid her mother's hospital bills. She renovated the family compound. She bought her brother Uche a new SUV to help him start a transportation business. She paid Ada's university fees. She even sponsored several younger cousins through school. She believed success meant lifting others as she climbed. Unfortunately, not everyone saw her generosity as love. Some saw it as an endless source of wealth. One evening, Uche drove his brand new SUV into the family compound. He parked proudly where everyone could see it. Mama Ngozi admired the shiny black vehicle with a smile. "Our daughter has done well." Uche nodded. "Very well." Ada walked around the vehicle, running her fingers along the polished paint. "I still can't believe she bought this." Uche smirked. "She can buy 10 more." Mama Ngozi looked thoughtful. "She has more money than she could ever spend." Ada smiled. "Exactly." There was a brief silence. Then Uche spoke. "I think we've been asking for too little." His mother looked at him. "What do you mean?" "We keep requesting thousands." He leaned back confidently. "Why not millions?" Mama Ngozi hesitated. "Won't she ask questions?" Uche laughed. "Not if we continue reminding her about Emeka." The room became quiet. No one objected. Not because they believed it was right. Because greed had already begun to silence their conscience. A few days later, Kayamika received a video call from her mother. Mama Ngozi looked worried. "My daughter. What happened?" "I didn't want to tell you." Immediately, Kayamika became concerned. "Tell me what?" "It's Emeka again." Her heart sank. "What now?" Mama Ngozi sighed dramatically. "I saw him entering a hotel." "With who?" "A woman." Kayamika closed her eyes. "Are you sure?" "I wish I wasn't." Her mother shook her head sadly. "I prayed I was mistaken." Tears appeared in her eyes. "You've sacrificed so much for him." Kayamika remained silent. The old pain returned. "What do you think I should do?" she asked quietly. Mama Ngozi hesitated, pretending to choose her words carefully. "I think, yes, you should move on." Those words echoed inside Kayamika long after the call ended. The truth, however, was very different. Earlier that same day, Emeka had indeed entered a hotel. Not as a guest, as a temporary cleaner. The small hotel had hired him for one day's work because 2 staff members had called in sick. He spent the entire afternoon sweeping hallways, mopping floors, and carrying heavy laundry bags. One female supervisor happened to speak kindly to him after noticing how hard he worked. Someone secretly photographed them standing together. The picture was sent directly to Uche. Within an hour, it reached Kayamika. A simple act of kindness had been transformed into another lie. As the months passed, Kayamika's company expanded into Europe and Asia. Her net worth doubled, then tripled. Financial magazines estimated her fortune at over $6 billion. Television hosts called her one of the most influential African entrepreneurs in history. Yet despite the unimaginable wealth surrounding her, she found herself working longer hours than ever. Grace often worried about her. One afternoon, Grace entered Kayamika's office carrying lunch. "You skipped breakfast again." "I'm not hungry." "You skipped dinner yesterday too." "I have a board meeting." Grace placed the food on the table. "You've changed." Kayamika looked up. "How?" "You smile less." "I'm just busy." "No." Grace folded her arms. "Busy people still smile." Kayamika sighed. "I don't want to talk about it." Grace nodded. "I know this is about Emeka." Silence. "I still think you're making a mistake." Kayamika looked away. "My family wouldn't all lie." Grace responded calmly. "Sometimes people tell the same lie because they all benefit from it." Kayamika frowned. "What do they gain?" Grace didn't answer immediately. Instead, she looked around the luxurious office. The expensive artwork, the designer furniture, the awards lining the shelves. Then she looked back at Kayamika. "What happens every time they call you?" "They ask how I'm doing. And they sometimes need help." Grace raised an eyebrow. "Financial help?" Kayamika hesitated. "Sometimes." Grace nodded slowly. "I see." Back in Nigeria, Uche had become addicted to luxury. The transportation business Kayamika financed had failed within a year because he rarely supervised it. Instead of investing wisely, he spent money on expensive clothes, parties, and gambling. Whenever he needed more money, he simply called his sister. His excuses became increasingly creative. "The business needs new vehicles." "Our mother needs treatment." "The roof is leaking." "A cousin needs surgery." Sometimes the reasons were true. Most times they weren't. Kayamika rarely questioned him. If someone claimed to be in need, she helped. She believed generosity was a blessing. Unfortunately, generosity without wisdom became an invitation for exploitation. One Sunday afternoon, the family gathered for lunch. Expensive meals covered the table. Roasted chicken, pepper soup, pounded yam, jollof rice. Everything had been purchased using money Kayamika had sent. As they ate, Ada laughed. "I've never lived this well." Uche smiled proudly. "And it's just the beginning." Mama Ngozi looked uncertain. "Don't you think we've gone too far?" Both younger relatives stared at her. "What do you mean?" Ada asked. "We keep lying about Emeka." Uche shrugged. "So?" "He hasn't actually done anything." "So?" Mama Ngozi lowered her voice. "He sacrificed everything for Kayamika." Uche's expression hardened. "And he loved her." He slammed his spoon onto the table. "Love doesn't pay bills." The room fell silent. He continued, "If Kayamika starts talking to him again, who do you think she'll trust?" Nobody answered. "Him." He leaned forward. "And then?" Still silence. "She'll stop listening to us." Ada slowly nodded. "I suppose that's true." Mama Ngozi looked uncomfortable. "What if she finds out?" Uche laughed confidently. "She won't." The certainty in his voice sent chills through the room. Meanwhile, Emeka's situation continued worsening. After months of searching for stable employment without success, even temporary jobs became scarce. Construction slowed during the rainy season. Hotels reduced casual workers. Schools had already hired new teachers. Some days he wandered the streets from morning until evening without earning a single naira. Hunger became his constant companion. One afternoon, while sitting beneath a bridge resting his tired feet, a little girl approached carrying a loaf of bread. She looked no older than 8. "My mummy said to give you this." Emeka smiled. "Tell your mother thank you." The girl nodded before running away. He looked at the bread for several moments. Instead of eating immediately, He broke it into pieces and shared it with two older homeless men nearby. One of them smiled. "You should have kept it." Emeka shrugged. "We're all hungry." The man shook his head. "You're different." Emeka smiled sadly. "My wife used to say the same thing." That evening, he visited a small internet cafe. He had saved enough money for 30 minutes online. His only goal was to send another email. He typed slowly. "My dearest Kayamika, I don't know why you've stopped talking to me, but I hope you're safe. If I've offended you without realizing it, I'm truly sorry. Please give me a chance to understand what happened. I miss hearing your voice. I still pray for you every day. No matter what you're feeling, please remember that I'll always be grateful for every moment we've shared. Your loving husband, Emeka." He pressed send. Unknown to him, the email landed in a folder Kayamika never checked because her assistant had filtered messages from blocked contacts. She never saw it. Weeks turned into months. The distance between husband and wife grew wider than the Atlantic Ocean that separated them. It was no longer measured in miles. It was measured in silence, in unanswered calls, in unspoken pain, in lies repeated so often that they began to sound like truth. One rainy evening, Kayamika sat alone in her penthouse, watching raindrops race down the glass windows. The city lights blurred beyond the storm. She absent-mindedly opened an old photo album on her phone. There they were, she and Emeka on their wedding day, smiling beneath colorful decorations. Another picture showed them laughing inside their tiny apartment while eating noodles from the same plate because they couldn't afford a dining table. Another showed Emeka proudly standing beside the old motorcycle he had later sold to send her abroad. She stared at that picture the longest. Her eyes slowly filled with tears. She quickly locked the phone. "No," she whispered firmly. "Don't think about him." But memories have a way of returning when the heart is quiet. For the first time in months, she began to wonder if she had been remembering only the accusations and forgetting the man who had once given up everything simply to help her chase a dream. 8 years. That was how long it had been since Kayamika Okafor had stood in the departure hall of Akanu Ibiam International Airport with tears in her eyes, promising Emeka that she would return. Back then, she had carried a single suitcase, a worn-out laptop, and a heart full of dreams. Now she owned private jets, luxury homes on 3 continents, and a business empire worth billions of dollars. The young woman who had once worried about paying rent had become one of the richest self-made African entrepreneurs in the world. Yet as she looked out the window of her private jet while it descended toward Nigeria, an unexpected feeling settled over her heart. Nervousness. She had imagined this homecoming hundreds of times. She had dreamed of seeing the streets of Enugu again. She had imagined embracing old neighbors. She had imagined returning to the little apartment where she and Emeka had once shared endless laughter despite having almost nothing. But those dreams belonged to another version of her. The woman sitting on the private jet was no longer certain those memories still had a place in her life. She closed her eyes. For a brief moment, Emeka's smiling face appeared in her mind. Almost immediately, another memory followed. The photographs, the accusations, the stories her family had repeated for years. She slowly opened her eyes again. "No," she whispered. "Don't think about that." Her personal assistant, Jessica, noticed her expression. "Are you all right, ma'am?" Kayamika forced a smile. "I'm fine. You've been quiet since we left New York." "I'm just thinking." "Excited to be home?" Kayamika looked through the window again. "I don't know." As soon as the aircraft touched down, airport officials were already waiting. News of her arrival had spread across the country days earlier. Television stations, newspapers, business magazines. Everyone wanted the first interview with Nigeria's billionaire daughter. When the jet door opened, photographers immediately began taking pictures. Flashes lit up the runway. Government officials stepped forward to welcome her. Business leaders shook her hand. Young entrepreneurs lined up hoping to meet the woman whose story had inspired millions. A reporter pushed through the crowd. "Madam Kayamika." She turned politely. "Welcome home." "Thank you. How does it feel to return to Nigeria after 8 years?" She smiled. It feels wonderful. What is the first thing you plan to do? She hesitated. I want to spend time with my family. The answer came automatically. Once upon a time she would have said something different. I want to see my husband. But those words never left her lips. Outside the airport, an impressive convoy waited. Several luxury SUVs, police escorts, security vehicles. The lead car was a brand-new Rolls-Royce Phantom imported specially for her visit. Crowds gathered along the roadside. People waved Nigerian flags. Children shouted excitedly, "Welcome home." Some held banners that read, "Welcome home, our pride." Others simply wanted a glimpse of the woman whose journey from poverty to unimaginable wealth had become a national inspiration. As her convoy drove through Enugu, Kayamika stared silently through the tinted window. Everything looked familiar, yet different. New buildings stood where empty fields once existed. Old shops had disappeared. Roads had been expanded. The city had grown. She wondered how much Emeka had changed. Then she quickly pushed the thought away. At the family compound, preparations had begun before sunrise. Large tents covered the courtyard. Musicians played traditional Igbo music. Caterers moved hurriedly between cooking pots. Neighbors gathered outside hoping to catch a glimpse of the famous billionaire. Mama Ngozi stood proudly at the gate wearing an expensive lace outfit Kayamika had bought during her last birthday. Uche adjusted his designer wristwatch. Ada smiled confidently. To everyone watching, they appeared to be the picture of a happy family. Only they knew how much of their happiness depended on keeping certain secrets buried. When the convoy finally entered the compound, cheers erupted. "My daughter!" Mama Ngozi cried as she hurried forward. Kayamika stepped out of the Rolls-Royce and hugged her mother warmly. "I've missed you. We've missed you too." Uche embraced her next. "Our billionaire sister." She laughed politely. "It's good to see you." Ada joined the embrace. The photographers captured every smiling face. No one would have guessed that beneath the celebration lay years of deception. The welcome party lasted for hours. Traditional dancers performed. Community leaders gave speeches. Politicians praised her achievements. Young girls asked for photographs. Old women blessed her future. One elderly chief stood and raised his walking stick. "Our daughter has shown the world that greatness can come from humble beginnings." The crowd applauded loudly. Another speaker added, "She has brought honor to Enugu." More applause followed. Throughout the celebration, however, Kayamika noticed something unusual. Nobody mentioned Emeka. Not once. At first she assumed it was coincidence. Later she realized it couldn't be. Someone had deliberately avoided his name. Late that evening, after most guests had left, the family gathered inside the newly renovated living room. The transformation amazed Kayamika. She barely recognized the house. The old furniture had been replaced with imported leather sofas. Large televisions hung on every wall. Elegant chandeliers sparkled overhead. Italian marble covered the floor. She smiled. "I'm glad you like the renovations." Mama Ngozi nodded proudly. "Everything is beautiful. You deserve comfort." Uche cleared his throat. "You've done more than enough for us." Kayamika smiled. "I'm happy I could help." Then, without thinking, she asked quietly, "How is Emeka?" The room became silent. So silent that the ticking wall clock suddenly seemed unusually loud. Mama Ngozi exchanged a quick glance with Uche. Ada looked down at the floor. Finally, Uche spoke. "We don't know." Kayamika frowned. "What do you mean?" "He disappeared." "When?" "Several years ago." She looked confused. "I thought you said he was living with another woman." Mama Ngozi sighed dramatically. "That's what everyone believed." "What happened?" "No one knows. He simply vanished." Another silence followed. Kayamika nodded slowly. "I see." She didn't ask another question. Not because she wasn't curious. Because she believed there was no point. As far as she knew, Emeka had chosen another life. That night, Kayamika slept in the luxurious guest suite prepared especially for her. The room was larger than the entire apartment she and Emeka had once shared. The bed was soft. The air conditioning worked perfectly. Fresh flowers decorated every corner. Yet sleep refused to come. She turned from one side to another. Finally, she got out of bed and walked toward the balcony. The cool night breeze carried familiar sounds. Crickets chirping, dogs barking in the distance, the occasional laughter of neighbors. Everything reminded her of simpler days. Without realizing it, she whispered aloud, "I wonder where you are." The words surprised even her. She quickly returned inside. The following morning, Kayamika visited several of the projects her foundation had funded. Schools, health centers, vocational training institutes, scholarship programs. Everywhere she went, grateful people surrounded her. A little girl hugged her tightly. "Thank you for my school fees." An elderly man held her hands with tears in his eyes. "My grandchildren can finally attend school." Young entrepreneurs proudly showed her businesses that had grown because of her foundation's grants. The appreciation touched her deeply. Helping others had always been her greatest joy. Yet amid the celebrations, she couldn't ignore the strange emptiness lingering inside her. Grace had once told her something before she left America. Success means very little if you have nobody meaningful to share it with. At the time, she dismissed the comment. Now it echoed inside her heart. Later that afternoon, she decided to visit the old neighborhood where she and Emeka had first lived as husband and wife. Against the advice of her security team, she insisted, "I just want to see it." The convoy slowly entered the familiar dusty streets. Children stopped playing football to stare. Women selling vegetables waved excitedly. Some elderly neighbors immediately recognized her. "Kayamika, my daughter." She stepped out of the vehicle to greet them. One elderly woman embraced her warmly. "You've become so beautiful." "Thank you, Mama. We're proud of you." Kayamika smiled. "I've missed everyone." Her eyes wandered toward the small apartment where she and Emeka had once lived. The building still stood. Although older now, the sight brought back memories she thought she had forgotten. She remembered laughing with Emeka while rain leaked through the roof. She remembered sharing one plate of food because they had only a single dining chair. She remembered him reading books late into the night while encouraging her never to give up. A lump formed in her throat. The elderly woman noticed. "You miss those days?" Kayamika smiled sadly. "Sometimes." The woman hesitated. "Have you?" Before she could finish, Uche quickly interrupted. "We should get going." The woman looked surprised but remained silent. Kayamika noticed the interruption. What was she going to say? "Nothing important," Uche answered quickly. "It was probably just village gossip." She accepted the explanation. For now. That evening, another grand dinner was organized in her honor at one of Enugu's finest hotels. Business executives, state officials, bank CEOs, foreign investors. Everyone wanted a few moments with Nigeria's billionaire success story. During dinner, several guests praised her humility. One businessman smiled. "With your wealth, you could live anywhere in the world." Kayamika nodded. "I could. So why keep investing in Nigeria?" She answered without hesitation. "Because this country raised me." The room applauded. Another guest asked, "What motivates you after achieving so much?" She paused. The question caught her off guard. Years earlier, the answer would have come instantly. "My husband." Now, she simply smiled politely. "I want to create opportunities for others." The audience applauded again. But inside, she felt something break. For the first time, she realized she had deliberately avoided speaking Emeka's name. Not because she had forgotten him, because saying it still hurt. After the dinner, her convoy drove slowly through the city toward her hotel. Night had fallen. Streetlights reflected on the wet roads after a light evening rain. Traffic was unusually heavy. Her Rolls-Royce eventually stopped at a long red light. Kayamika leaned back against the seat, exhausted after another day of endless meetings and celebrations. Outside, street vendors moved between vehicles selling bottled water, snacks, phone chargers, and newspapers. A few homeless people wandered through the traffic, quietly asking drivers for spare change. Kayamika barely noticed them. She was reading tomorrow's schedule on her tablet. Then, without warning, something made her look up. For only a second. Just long enough to notice a thin, bearded man wearing torn clothes slowly walking between the rows of vehicles with an old plastic bowl in his hands. His head remained lowered. His shoulders were bent with exhaustion. The traffic light turned green before she could see his face clearly. Her driver pressed the accelerator, and the convoy moved forward. She glanced back through the rear window. The man had already disappeared into the crowd. A strange feeling settled over her heart. She couldn't explain why. There had been something oddly familiar about the way the homeless man walked. Something about his posture. Something about the quiet dignity with which he carried himself despite his condition. She shook her head. It couldn't be. Then she looked away, unaware that destiny had just placed her only a few meters away from the man whose life had once revolved entirely around her. Neither of them knew that before the week was over, another traffic light would stop them once again. And this time, neither of them would drive away. The following morning, Enugu woke to another bright, bustling day. Street traders arranged tomatoes and peppers in neat piles. Commercial buses raced through busy intersections, their conductors shouting destinations at the top of their lungs. School children in colorful uniforms hurried along the sidewalks while motorcycles weaved through traffic with practiced confidence. Inside the presidential suite of one of Enugu's most luxurious hotels, Kayamika Okafor sat at the dining table staring at a breakfast she had barely touched. Her assistant, Jessica, looked concerned. "You've hardly eaten." Kayamika forced a smile. "I'm just not very hungry." Jessica glanced at the untouched plate. "You said the same thing yesterday. I'll eat later." Instead, Kayamika found herself thinking about the homeless man she had briefly seen at the traffic light the previous evening. It made no sense. She had seen thousands of homeless people throughout her life. Why had this one remained in her thoughts? There had been something strangely familiar about him. Not his face. She hadn't seen it clearly. It was the way he walked. Slow, calm, almost gentle, as though life had beaten him down but never managed to make him bitter. She shook her head. "You're imagining things." Jessica looked up. "Sorry, nothing." The day's schedule was packed. First, she would inspect a new technology hub her foundation had funded. After that came a meeting with state government officials. Then lunch with investors. A television interview. Finally, an evening charity gala. Normally she loved staying busy. Today, however, her mind wandered constantly. During the television interview, the presenter smiled warmly. "You've inspired millions of young Africans." "Thank you. If you could give one piece of advice to anyone chasing a dream, what would it be?" Without thinking, Kayamika replied, "Never forget the people who sacrificed for you." The words left her mouth before she had time to stop them. For a brief moment, she froze. Images flashed through her mind. Emeka selling his motorcycle. Emeka handing over the land documents. Emeka smiling at the airport. She quickly composed herself and continued answering questions. But the memories refused to disappear. Later that afternoon, she visited the technology hub. Hundreds of young entrepreneurs gathered around her, eager to share their inventions and business ideas. One young man demonstrated a mobile application designed to help farmers sell crops directly to consumers. Another had created affordable solar-powered irrigation equipment. A young woman proudly displayed software she had built to help small businesses manage finances. Kayamika smiled as she encouraged each of them. "Keep going. Don't give up. The world needs your ideas." One teenage girl hesitated before asking, "Ma'am." "Yes. Who believed in you before you became successful?" Again, that question. Again, her heart tightened. She smiled politely. "My husband." The young girl grinned. "He must be very proud." Kayamika simply nodded. She couldn't trust herself to speak. By late afternoon, dark clouds gathered across the sky. A gentle rain began falling as her convoy left the technology center. Water splashed against the windshield. Traffic became slower than usual. Street vendors hurried to cover their goods with plastic sheets. Pedestrians searched for shelter beneath shop roofs. Inside the Rolls-Royce, soft classical music played through the speakers. Jessica looked over tomorrow's schedule. "We'll head back to the hotel first before tonight's charity event." Kayamika nodded absent-mindedly. She wasn't listening. She watched the rain instead. The droplets racing across the window reminded her of another rainy day years ago. The day the roof of their tiny apartment had leaked so badly that she and Emika spent the night moving buckets around the room to catch the water. Instead of complaining, Emika had started singing loudly. She had laughed until her stomach hurt. That had been one of the happiest nights of her life. Despite having almost nothing, a tear unexpectedly formed in her eye. She quickly wiped it away before Jessica noticed. The convoy approached one of Enugu's busiest intersections. The traffic light turned red. Cars stopped in long rows. As usual, street hawkers began moving between vehicles. Some sold bottled water. Others offered fruit, newspapers, or phone chargers. Among them were several beggars. An elderly woman carrying a baby. A blind man tapping his walking stick. 2 barefoot children asking for coins. Then, a thin man slowly stepped into view. He wore torn trousers stained with dirt. His oversized shirt hung loosely over his frail body. A faded cap partially covered his face. His beard was long and unkempt. In one hand he carried a small plastic bowl. With the other, he politely greeted motorists. He wasn't shouting. He wasn't forcing anyone. He simply bowed his head respectfully. "If you have anything, God bless you." His voice barely carried above the noise of traffic. Kayamika looked up casually. Then, everything stopped. The man's face slowly lifted. Their eyes met. The world disappeared. Her breathing stopped. The music inside the car faded. The traffic noise vanished. Time itself seemed to freeze. She knew those eyes. Even beneath the beard. Even beneath the exhaustion. Even beneath years of suffering. She knew them. "No," she whispered. Her body began trembling. "It can't be." The man looked equally shocked. His tired eyes widened. The plastic bowl slipped from his hand. Several coins scattered across the wet road. His lips moved silently. "Chi." He couldn't finish the sentence. Kayamika stared in disbelief. The beard, the hollow cheeks, the thin body, the torn clothes, but the eyes, those gentle brown eyes had not changed. It was Emika, the man who had sold everything he owned to send her abroad. The man she believed had betrayed her. The man her family claimed was living happily with another woman. He was standing barefoot in the rain, begging. "No!" The scream escaped before she realized she had spoken. Jessica looked up immediately. "Ma'am! My God!" Without another word, Kayamika threw open the Rolls-Royce door. Her security team reacted instantly. "Ma'am!" She ignored them. Rain soaked her expensive designer dress within seconds as she ran into the middle of the busy intersection. Drivers began sounding their horns. Traffic officers shouted. People turned to watch. None of it mattered. "Emika!" Her voice cracked. The homeless man stood frozen. His eyes filled with tears. He whispered her name as though he couldn't believe she was real. "Kayamika!" She reached him. For several seconds, neither moved. She looked at him closely. His face was thinner. His hands were rough and covered with scars. His clothes were worn beyond repair. The expensive wristwatch she had bought him on their first wedding anniversary was gone. The confident smile she loved had disappeared. He looked older than his years. Not because of age. Because of pain. Her knees weakened. She collapsed in front of him. "No!" She sobbed uncontrollably. "No!" People gathered around them. Some recognized Kayamika immediately. Others simply stared in confusion. "Isn't that the billionaire? What is she doing? Who is that man?" Phones appeared. Videos began recording. Still, neither of them noticed. Flashbacks crashed into Kayamika's mind one after another. Emika handing a buyer the keys to his motorcycle. Emika signing away his father's land. Emeka carrying furniture out of their tiny apartment. Emeka smiling at the airport despite the tears in his eyes. Go and conquer the world. I'll be waiting when you return. The letter, the promises, the prayers, every sacrifice, every act of love. Then she looked again at the plastic bowl lying in the rain. Coins scattered across the road. Her heart shattered. She covered her face with both hands and cried harder than she ever had in her life. What have I done? Emeka slowly bent down. Despite everything, despite the years of silence, despite the unanswered calls, despite the pain, his first instinct was still to comfort her. Please. His voice was soft. Don't cry. She looked up at him in disbelief. Don't cry. He smiled weakly. I don't like seeing you cry. Fresh tears streamed down her face. She grabbed his worn shirt. What happened to you? He hesitated. It's a long story. She shook her head violently. No. She looked around him. Where's your house? Silence. Where's your job? Silence again. Her breathing became uneven. Why are you here? Emeka lowered his eyes. I'll explain. She looked at his feet. He wasn't wearing shoes. The sight broke something inside her. Jessica and the security team finally reached them. The guards looked confused. Ma'am. Kayamika turned sharply. Bring an umbrella. Immediately. And get a doctor. Jessica quickly nodded. Right away. Within seconds, several umbrellas shielded them from the rain. But Kayamika barely noticed. She couldn't take her eyes off Emeka. She reached out carefully and held his rough hands. The calluses shocked her. These weren't the hands of a man living comfortably with another woman. These were the hands of someone who had worked until there was nothing left. She gently traced one of the scars across his palm. When did this happen? He smiled sadly. I don't remember. A crowd now surrounded them. Whispers spread rapidly. That's her husband? I thought they separated. Look at him. Oh God. Several women quietly wiped tears from their eyes. An elderly man shook his head. Life. A young journalist who happened to be nearby recognized the significance of the moment and began recording from a distance. None of them interrupted. The scene spoke louder than any words could. Kayamika suddenly remembered something. She quickly opened her handbag. Inside was the old brown envelope. She had carried Emeka's letter with her all these years. She removed the worn paper with trembling hands. The edges had become soft from being unfolded countless times. She looked at the familiar handwriting. No matter what happens, stay the kind-hearted woman I fell in love with. She burst into tears again. I failed you. Emeka gently shook his head. No. I believed. She couldn't finish. I know. You know? He nodded. I guess someone had filled your heart with lies. Her eyes widened. You knew. I didn't know for certain. Then why didn't you hate me? He smiled. Because hate wouldn't bring you back. Those simple words pierced deeper than any accusation ever could. The traffic police finally cleared a path. Jessica quietly approached. Ma'am. Kayamika looked up. We should leave before the crowd becomes dangerous. She nodded slowly, then turned back to Emeka. Come with me. He hesitated. I'm not dressed. I don't care. My clothes are dirty. I don't care. I'll embarrass you. She stepped closer until they were only inches apart. Tears still streamed down her face. You could never embarrass me. Her voice trembled. The only thing that embarrasses me, she struggled to continue, is that I allowed the man who gave me everything to end up like this. Emeka lowered his eyes. For the first time in years, he saw genuine remorse in hers. She gently took his hand, not caring who watched, not caring about cameras, not caring about the expensive dress now soaked with rain. The billionaire and the homeless beggar stood hand in hand in the middle of a busy Nigerian intersection. One had gained the whole world. The other had lost everything. Yet in that moment, neither wealth nor poverty mattered. Only truth. As they slowly walked toward the waiting Rolls-Royce together, Kayamika silently made herself a promise. She would uncover every lie, every betrayal, every stolen year, no matter who was responsible, because she finally understood something that money could never buy back. The greatest treasure she had ever possessed had never been the billions in her bank account. It had been the faithful man walking beside her in torn clothes, the husband she had abandoned because she chose to believe the voices of others over the heart of the man who had loved her without conditions. The ride to the hotel was unlike anything either of them had imagined. Inside the luxurious Rolls-Royce, silence filled the air. The soft leather seats, the polished wood panels, the gentle hum of the air conditioner. All of it felt strangely out of place. Emeka sat stiffly near the door, afraid even to lean back against the expensive seat. Drops of rain still clung to his beard, and despite the warm air inside the vehicle, he kept his hands folded tightly in his lap. His torn clothes were damp and stained from years of hardship. Across from him sat Kayamika. She could not stop looking at him. Every few seconds, fresh tears gathered in her eyes. This couldn't be real. The man who had once walked proudly beside her, the man who had sacrificed his father's land, the man who had encouraged her through every lonely night in America, had been begging at a traffic light, and she had driven past him the day before without recognizing him. The thought made her chest ache. "I'm sorry," she whispered. Emeka looked up. "You've said that many times already. It isn't enough." "No, it will never be enough." He offered a small, tired smile. "We don't have to talk inside the car." She nodded. "You're right." But inside her heart, she knew she would never truly forgive herself. When they arrived at the hotel, the security staff looked surprised to see a homeless man stepping out of the billionaire's Rolls-Royce. Some employees exchanged puzzled glances. Others whispered quietly among themselves. Jessica immediately noticed. She stepped forward before anyone could say anything inappropriate. "This gentleman is Mrs. Okafor's guest." Her voice was calm but firm. "He will be treated with the same respect as every other guest." The whispers stopped instantly. Kayamika looked gratefully at Jessica. "Thank you." Jessica smiled gently. "No one deserves to be judged by their clothes." Those simple words made Kayamika lower her head. She wished she had remembered that years earlier. Instead of taking Emeka directly to one of the suites, Kayamika first led him to the hotel's private wellness center. A doctor had already been called. The elderly physician greeted them warmly. "I'm Dr. Ibrahim." He smiled kindly at Emeka. "Let's have a look at you." For nearly an hour, the doctor carefully examined him. He checked his blood pressure, his heartbeat, his breathing, his injuries. Several old scars covered Emeka's hands and shoulders. His body showed clear signs of prolonged malnutrition and physical exhaustion. Finally, Dr. Ibrahim removed his glasses. "Physically, he'll recover." Kayamika immediately leaned forward. "And the rest?" The doctor looked at Emeka thoughtfully. "His body has suffered." He paused. "But I think his heart has suffered even more." Those words hung heavily in the room. After the examination, the hotel arranged fresh clothes for Emeka. A barber offered to trim his overgrown beard. At first, Emeka hesitated. "I don't want anyone spending money on me." Kayamika gently touched his arm. "Please." He looked into her eyes. For the first time in years, he saw the same woman he had fallen in love with. The woman whose kindness had once inspired him. Slowly he nodded. "If it makes you happy." An hour later, he emerged wearing a simple but elegant shirt and trousers. His beard had been neatly trimmed. His hair was cut short. The years of hardship could still be seen in his face, but beneath them stood the Emeka Kayamika remembered. She covered her mouth as tears returned. "There you are." He smiled shyly. "I look different." "You look like yourself." That evening, Kayamika asked the hotel staff to prepare a quiet dining room where they could speak privately. No reporters, no security guards, no assistants, just the two of them. A simple meal was placed on the table. Jollof rice, grilled fish, plantains, fresh juice, the same kind of food they used to share years ago. For several minutes, neither of them touched the food. Finally, Kayamika spoke. "I need to know everything." Emeka nodded slowly. "Where do you want me to start?" From the beginning. He took a deep breath. The beginning. The first time you stopped answering my calls. I thought you were just busy. He smiled sadly. You had always warned me that building a company would take time. So I waited. I wasn't worried. I was proud. I kept telling everyone that my wife was changing the world. Kayamika looked down at the table. Every word hurt. I called every evening. Sometimes you answered. Sometimes you didn't. I thought. He laughed softly. I thought you were simply tired. Then your calls became shorter. You stopped laughing. You stopped asking about my day. I asked if I had offended you. You always said you were busy. I believed you. He looked at her kindly. I trusted you. Fresh tears rolled down Kayamika's face. I didn't deserve that trust. He gently shook his head. Let me finish. When I lost my teaching job. She looked up immediately. You lost your job? He nodded. The school made budget cuts. I searched everywhere for work. I didn't tell you because I didn't want you worrying while building your company. So I worked wherever I could. Construction sites. Cleaning hotels. Loading trucks. Anything. His hands instinctively rubbed against each other. The scars came from carrying cement blocks. Kayamika reached across the table and slowly held his rough hands. She could feel every callus. Every hardened patch of skin. Each one told a story she had never bothered to ask about. My landlord eventually asked me to leave. I couldn't pay the rent. So I moved from place to place. I slept in church halls. Sometimes in unfinished buildings. Sometimes wherever I found shelter. He paused. But every night. He smiled gently. I still prayed for you. Kayamika could no longer stop crying. You prayed. He nodded. I asked God to protect you. She covered her face. I don't understand. I abandoned you. You never abandoned my prayers. She finally asked the question that had haunted her for years. The women. He looked confused. What women? The ones everyone said you were always with. Realization slowly spread across his face. So that's what this was about. He leaned back in his chair. The woman outside the supermarket? She nodded. She's one of the teachers from my school. The hotel. The supervisor who assigned me work. The restaurant. A parent whose child I tutored. He smiled sadly. I didn't know people were taking pictures. Kayamika's heart sank. They sent them to me. He nodded quietly. I guess something like that. She stared at him. Why didn't you tell me? I tried. He reached into the small bag the hotel had given him. Inside was a worn notebook. Its pages were filled with dates. Phone numbers. Notes. She frowned. What is this? My record. He opened the notebook. Every page contained careful entries. January 14th. Called Kayamika. No answer. Left message. January 18th. Sent email. No reply. February 2nd. Tried video call. Phone unavailable. February 20th. Wrote another email. March 5th. Called again. Page after page. Month after month. Year after year. Every attempt documented. Every unanswered call recorded. Kayamika's vision blurred with tears. You kept track. He smiled. It helped me remember that I never stopped trying. She turned more pages. Hundreds of entries. Some pages even included prayers. Lord, please keep her safe today. I hope she's eating properly. Help her business grow. Her hands trembled uncontrollably. I sent letters too. What? I mailed several. I don't know if they reached you. She slowly shook her head. I never received them. I thought maybe your assistant handled your mail. She looked horrified. I never knew. Then Emika asked softly, Can I ask you something? She nodded. What made you believe I could do those things? The question pierced her heart. She couldn't answer immediately. Finally she whispered, My family. He wasn't surprised. They kept calling. They said they saw you. They sent pictures. They cried. They told me you laughed about me. They said you had another family. Her voice broke. I wanted to believe you. I really did. But they kept repeating the same stories. I became angry. I became hurt. And then, she lowered her head. I blocked you. The words tasted bitter. I blocked the man who sold everything for me. Emeka remained silent for a long moment. Then he asked quietly, "Did it ever occur to you to ask me?" She burst into tears. "No. Why?" "I don't know." "No." He looked into her eyes. "You do know." She closed her eyes. "I was afraid." "Afraid of what?" "Afraid the stories were true. So instead of asking me, I punished you." The room fell silent. Neither of them spoke. The truth was too painful. Several minutes passed before Emeka finally reached across the table. He gently wiped a tear from her cheek. She looked at him in disbelief. "Why are you comforting me?" He smiled sadly. "Because you're hurting. I caused this. I know. You should hate me. I tried." She looked surprised. "You tried?" He nodded. "There were nights I wanted to be angry. I wanted to ask why. I wanted to blame you. What stopped you?" He looked down at his wedding ring. The old ring was scratched and worn from years of hardship. I remembered the woman who cried at the airport. I remembered the woman who believed in impossible dreams. I couldn't make myself hate her. Kayamika broke down completely. She left her chair and knelt beside him. "I'm so sorry." He placed his hand gently on her head. "I know." "No." She shook her head repeatedly. "You don't. I chose strangers over you. I chose gossip over love. I chose suspicion over trust." Her voice cracked. "And you lost everything." Emeka looked out the window. The city lights shimmered in the distance. "I didn't lose everything." She looked at him through tears. "You didn't." He smiled softly. "I never lost hope." She stared at him. "Even after all these years?" "I believed one day we'd meet again." "You really believed that?" He nodded. "I just didn't imagine it would happen at a traffic light." Despite everything, they both laughed. It was a small laugh, painful laugh, but it was the first time they had laughed together in years. As the evening drew to a close, Kayamika made one final request. "There's something I need to know." "What is it?" She looked directly into his eyes. "Tell me the truth." "I always will." She took a deep breath. "In all these years?" "Yes." "Did you ever stop loving me?" Emeka didn't hesitate. "Not for a single day." The answer shattered the last wall around her heart. She rested her head against his shoulder and cried quietly. For the first time in years, she wasn't crying because of confusion. She was crying because the truth had finally found its way back to her. And as she sat beside the man she had wronged, another truth slowly began to form in her mind. If Emeka had never betrayed her, then someone else had. Someone had deliberately stolen 8 years of their marriage. Someone had destroyed the life of the only man who had ever loved her without asking for anything in return. As anger slowly replaced guilt, Kayamika wiped away her tears and looked up with a determination Emeka had not seen in years. "Tomorrow," she said quietly, "I'm going to find out exactly who did this." She had no idea that the answers she was about to uncover would lead directly to the people she had trusted most, her own family. Kayamika barely slept that night. She lay awake in the presidential suite, staring at the ceiling while Emeka's words echoed endlessly in her mind. "I never stopped trying. I wrote letters. I called. I prayed for you every day." Each sentence felt like another weight pressing against her heart. She replayed every moment from the previous evening. The worn notebook filled with dates, the unanswered emails, the rough calluses on Emeka's hands, the years he had spent sleeping in churches, unfinished buildings, and eventually on the streets. And through it all, he had never spoken a single bitter word against her. She turned her head toward the bedside table where Emeka's old notebook rested. She had asked if she could keep it overnight. Now she slowly opened it again. Page after page was filled with careful handwriting. There were dates, prayer requests, phone records, even little notes to himself. "Maybe she's preparing for a big meeting today. Don't disturb her too much. She sounded tired tonight." Pray for her health. I hope she remembers to eat breakfast. A tear slipped down her cheek. While she had been building skyscrapers of success, he had been building monuments of faithfulness. She closed the notebook gently. I owe you the truth, she whispered, and I'm going to find it. Just after sunrise, Kayamika called Jessica into her suite. Jessica entered carrying a tablet. You wanted to see me? Yes. Kayamika's voice was calm, but there was a determination in her eyes that Jessica had never seen before. I need the best private investigation team in Nigeria. Jessica frowned slightly. Immediately? Immediately. May I ask why? Kayamika hesitated only for a second. I've made the biggest mistake of my life. Jessica nodded. I'll make the arrangements. Within an hour, one of Nigeria's most respected investigative firms had agreed to meet her. Later that morning, 3 investigators arrived at the hotel. The leader introduced himself. My name is David Ease. He was in his early 50s, calm, observant, and spoke very little. Years of investigative work had taught him that listening was often more valuable than talking. He shook Kayamika's hand. How can we help you? She looked at him steadily. I want the truth. About my husband. She briefly explained everything. The accusations, the photographs, the years of silence, finding Emeka begging on the street. David listened without interrupting. When she finished, he remained quiet for several moments. Finally, he asked one question. Do you want the truth? He paused. Even if it hurts? Kayamika nodded firmly. I've already lived with a lie. I'm ready for the truth. The investigation began immediately. David divided his team into several groups. One team would examine the photographs Kayamika had received over the years. Another would interview neighbors. Another would investigate financial transactions. Another would locate people who had known Emeka during those missing years. David himself handled the family. Sometimes, he told his team, the biggest lies come from the people closest to us. The first breakthrough came faster than anyone expected. A digital forensic expert carefully examined the photographs stored on Kayamika's phone. Several hours later, he entered David's office carrying printed reports. These images have been altered. David looked up. In what way? The timestamps don't match. What else? The metadata shows they were edited before being sent. He placed one photograph on the desk. It showed Emeka standing beside a young woman outside a supermarket. The original image was cropped. David studied it carefully. What was removed? The expert enlarged the original. Standing beside Emeka and the woman were 6 other teachers from the same school. It had been an ordinary staff outing. Someone had deliberately removed everyone except Emeka and the female teacher. David leaned back slowly. So it begins. The second discovery was even more disturbing. The investigators visited the secondary school where Emeka had once taught. Several former colleagues immediately recognized his photograph. Mrs. Esther smiled sadly. That's one of the finest men I've ever worked with. David asked carefully, We've heard rumors about his relationships with women. The teachers exchanged confused looks. What relationships? That he was seeing another woman. Mrs. Esther almost laughed. Emeka? Another teacher shook his head. He barely spoke to anyone unless it was about teaching or his wife. Mrs. Esther smiled. He talked about Kayamika every day. What did he say? How proud he was. He showed us newspaper articles about her. He said one day she would change Africa. David made notes. Did you ever see him behaving inappropriately with another woman? All the teachers answered together. Never. Meanwhile, another team interviewed neighbors from Emeka's old apartment. An elderly woman welcomed them warmly. I remember him well. What kind of man was he? She smiled. A good one. He worked hard. He respected everyone. He loved his wife. David's assistant asked gently, Did he ever bring women home? The old woman looked shocked. Never. What happened after his wife stopped talking to him? Her expression changed. He became very quiet. He used to sit outside every evening waiting for her call. Sometimes he smiled after speaking to her. Then the calls stopped. She sighed deeply. I watched that man slowly lose everything. As investigators gathered more statements, a pattern began to emerge. Everyone outside Kayamika's family described the same Emeka. Faithful, hardworking, kind, patient, honest. No one had ever seen evidence of infidelity. Not one person. The financial investigation uncovered something even more shocking. A forensic accountant carefully reviewed years of bank transfers. Every payment Kayamika had sent to help her family had been documented. The accountant frowned. This is unusual. David walked over. What is it? He pointed at several transactions. Notice the timing. Every large transfer from Kayamika occurred shortly after one of the accusations against Emeka. David studied the dates. 1 million naira after the supermarket photograph. 5 million after the hotel story. 10 million after claims that Emeka had disappeared. Again. The pattern was impossible to ignore. David whispered. They were profiting from every lie. The investigators then examined phone records. They discovered frequent communication between Uche and several local photographers. One photographer eventually agreed to speak after learning the investigation involved possible fraud. I didn't know what they were doing. David remained calm. What exactly did they ask you to do? Take pictures. Of who? That man. He pointed at Emeka's photograph. They wanted pictures whenever he was talking to any woman. What if nothing happened? The photographer lowered his head. They told me to wait. So I waited. Sometimes for hours. And if a woman greeted him, I took the picture. If someone smiled, I took the picture. If he accepted directions from someone, I took the picture. David asked quietly, did they tell you why? They said his wife needed proof. Another photographer admitted something worse. They asked me to crop people out. David's eyes narrowed. Crop? Yes. If several people were standing together, they wanted only Emeka and one woman left in the picture. David looked at the enlarged images again. Exactly as the forensic expert had discovered. The investigation continued for 3 days. Every new piece of evidence pointed in the same direction. Then came the biggest breakthrough. A former employee at a local phone repair shop contacted the investigators after seeing news reports that Kayamika had returned to Nigeria. I think I know something. David arranged a meeting. The young technician appeared nervous. I repaired Uche's phone 2 years ago. What happened? I accidentally saw some deleted voice notes. David leaned forward. Voice notes. The technician nodded. They were recordings from your client's mother. What did they say? The technician took a deep breath. I remembered them because they sounded strange. He pulled out an old backup drive. I copied everything before repairing the phone. David's heart began racing. Do you still have them? Yes. That evening, inside the investigator's office, everyone listened silently as the recordings played. Mama Ngozi's familiar voice filled the room. Make sure she believes this one. Another recording. Tell her you saw Emeka with another woman again. Another. Don't let her speak to him. If they reconcile, she'll stop sending money. Silence filled the room. David slowly removed his glasses. No one spoke. The evidence was overwhelming. The following morning, David arrived at the hotel carrying several thick folders. Kayamika was waiting. She stood as soon as he entered. You found something. He nodded. We found everything. Her heartbeat quickened. He placed the first folder on the table. The photographs were manipulated. The second, your husband never had an affair. The third, every accusation came from members of your own family. Then he placed a small audio recorder in front of her. You should hear this yourself. With trembling hands, Kayamika pressed play. Her mother's voice filled the room. Don't let her talk to Emeka. Another recording. If she believes him, we lose everything. Another. Ask for more money after telling her another story. The recorder slipped from Kayamika's fingers. She couldn't breathe. No! David remained silent. She played another recording. This time it was Uche. Crop everyone else out of the picture. She'll think they're alone. Another. We'll keep this going until she forgets him completely. Tears streamed down Kayamika's face. She covered her mouth to stop herself from screaming. For years, she had believed strangers. No, not strangers. Family. The people she trusted most. The people she had loved. The people she had sacrificed for. She looked at David with broken eyes. They destroyed him. David answered quietly. No. He glanced toward the window. They tried. She followed his gaze. Far below, she could see Emeka walking slowly through the hotel garden, smiling warmly at a little boy who had dropped his toy. Despite everything he had suffered, he was still kind, still gentle, still the same man she had married. Fresh tears rolled down her face. They didn't just destroy him. Her voice trembled. They destroyed 8 years of our marriage. David closed the final folder. There is enough evidence here for criminal charges involving fraud, forgery, and financial deception. Kayamika remained silent for a long time. Her grief slowly transformed into something else. Resolve. She wiped away her tears. Then she stood. When my husband sold everything to send me abroad, she looked at the folders. He gave me a future. She closed them carefully. My family repaid him by taking away his present. Her voice became steady. They celebrated while he starved. She looked directly at David. They smiled while he slept on the streets. She picked up the audio recorder one final time. And they lied every single day. She inhaled deeply. Invite all of them to dinner tomorrow night. David looked at her. You want them arrested there? She slowly shook her head. No. A cold determination settled over her face. First, she said quietly, they're going to look me in the eyes while they hear every lie they've ever told. The investigation was over. The reckoning was about to begin. The invitation arrived at the Okafor family compound just before noon. It was delivered by one of Kayamika's assistants in a cream-colored envelope embossed with the logo of her foundation. Uche smiled the moment he opened it. What did I tell you? He said confidently, waving the invitation in the air. Mama Ngozi looked up from the sofa. What is it? A private family dinner. Ada clapped her hands excitedly. I knew it. Knew what? Mama Ngozi asked. Ada grinned. She's about to surprise us. Uche nodded in agreement. I've been expecting this. Mama Ngozi frowned. Expecting what? He leaned back proudly. She's probably going to announce another investment. Or buy us another property. Ada laughed. Maybe she's finally giving us shares in her company. None of them noticed the uneasiness creeping into Mama Ngozi's heart. Ever since Kayamika had returned, something about her daughter had changed. She smiled less. She asked more questions. And ever since that strange visit to the old neighborhood, Mama Ngozi had sensed that something wasn't right. She looked at Uche. Are you sure everything is all right? He dismissed the concern with a wave of his hand. Relax. He smiled confidently. She trusts us. Those words would haunt him before the night was over. At the hotel, preparations were already underway. The banquet hall had been reserved exclusively for the family. Unlike the extravagant celebrations held earlier in the week, this room was simple and elegant. One long dining table, soft lighting, fresh flowers. No reporters, no politicians, no business partners, only family, or at least, the people who were supposed to have been family. Jessica entered the room carrying a folder. Everything is ready. Kayamika nodded. The recordings? Prepared. The photographs? Organized. The financial reports? Here. She handed over several neatly arranged files. Kayamika looked through them one final time. Every manipulated photograph, every bank transfer, every witness statement, every audio recording, every piece of evidence. Years of lies reduced to a stack of documents. Jessica hesitated before speaking. Are you sure you want to do this yourself? Kayamika looked toward the window. Outside, she could see Emeka sitting quietly in the hotel garden reading a newspaper. The same gentle expression rested on his face despite everything he had endured. She smiled sadly. He stood alone for 8 years. Her eyes hardened. They won't stand alone tonight. Earlier that afternoon, Kayamika had spoken with Emeka. They sat beneath a large tree overlooking the hotel gardens. He noticed something different about her. You found out the truth. She nodded. I know everything. He remained quiet. I know who lied. He looked down. I thought you might. She took his hand. I've invited them here. Emeka sighed softly. What are you planning? They're going to answer for what they did. He studied her face carefully. I don't want revenge. She looked surprised. You don't. He slowly shook his head. I want truth. She smiled faintly. Truth sometimes feels like revenge to people who have spent years hiding lies. He couldn't argue with that. As evening approached, the family arrived at the hotel dressed in their finest clothes. Uche wore an expensive designer suit. Ada carried a luxury handbag Kayamika had purchased for her birthday. Mama Ngozi wore expensive jewelry funded by money her daughter had sent over the years. The irony wasn't lost on the hotel staff who now knew the full story. Jessica welcomed them politely. Good evening. Good evening, Uche replied cheerfully. Where is my sister? She's waiting inside. As they followed Jessica toward the private dining room, Uche whispered confidently, I told you. Ada smiled. Something big is coming. Neither noticed that no one else in the hallway was smiling. Inside the dining room, Kayamika stood beside the large window. She wore a simple white dress. No expensive jewelry. No designer accessories. She looked calm. Almost too calm. The family entered with broad smiles. My daughter! Mama Ngozi exclaimed. Kayamika turned. Good evening. Her voice was polite, respectful, but strangely distant. Uche noticed immediately. Everything all right? She smiled. Please. She gestured toward the table. Let's sit. Dinner was served. For several minutes, ordinary conversation filled the room. Travel, business, politics, the weather. No one mentioned Emeka. Not yet. Eventually, Kayamika placed her fork down. The room fell quiet. I have something I'd like to discuss. Uche smiled. We're listening. She folded her hands calmly. Do you remember telling me that Emeka was cheating on me? No one answered immediately. Finally, Mama Ngozi nodded. Yes. You were worried. I was. Kayamika looked at Uche. You also told me. He nodded cautiously. I only repeated what people were saying. She turned to Ada. And you? Ada lowered her eyes. I saw things. I see. Another silence settled over the room. Then Kayamika pressed a button on the remote control lying beside her. A large television screen came to life. The first photograph appeared. Emeka standing beside the female teacher. Uche smiled confidently. That's what we showed you. Kayamika nodded. Yes. She pressed another button. The original, uncropped photograph replaced it. Now 6 additional teachers stood smiling around them. The room became silent. Uche's smile disappeared. What? Another image appeared. The hotel supervisor. Then the original. Several staff members surrounded them. Another. The supermarket. Again, the uncropped version revealed an entire group of shoppers. Kayamika slowly looked around the table. Would anyone like to explain? No one spoke. She pressed another button. Bank statements appeared. Large transfers. Dates. Amounts. Arrows connected each payment to accusations against Emeka. This transfer, she pointed, arrived 2 days after you told me he had another woman. Another slide. This one came after you claimed he disappeared. Another. And this one. She looked directly at Uche. The day after you asked me for 10 million naira. Sweat formed on Uche's forehead. He forced a laugh. That's just coincidence. Kayamika nodded slowly. I thought so too. She reached for a small audio recorder. Until now. She pressed play. Mama Ngozi's voice filled the room. Don't let her talk to Emeka. The room froze. Another recording followed. If she speaks to him, we'll lose everything. Mama Ngozi's face turned pale. Where? She whispered. Did you get that? Kayamika didn't answer. Instead, she played another recording. Uche's voice echoed through the speakers. Crop everyone else out of the picture. She only needs to think they're alone. Ada gasped. Uche closed his eyes. Then another. Tell her another story. She'll send more money. Silence. Complete silence. Even the air inside the room felt heavy. Kayamika slowly stood. Tears filled her eyes. Not tears of weakness. Tears of heartbreak. I found Emeka. Nobody spoke. She continued. He wasn't living with another woman. Silence. He wasn't spending my money. Still silence. He wasn't laughing at me. Her voice trembled. I found him. She struggled to continue. Begging. Mama Ngozi covered her mouth. No. I found the man who sold everything for me standing barefoot at a traffic light. Fresh tears rolled down Kayamika's face. He had no home, no job, no food, and while he slept beneath unfinished buildings. She looked around the table. All of you were eating with money I sent. Mama Ngozi finally broke down. My daughter. No. Kayamika raised her hand. Don't. I can explain. I've heard enough explanations. It wasn't supposed to. What? She looked directly at her mother. Destroy his life? Mama Ngozi cried openly. We only wanted. What? A better life. Kayamika stared at her. A better life? She laughed bitterly. You already had one. She pointed around the room. The house. The cars. The businesses. The jewelry. The education. I gave you all of it. Her voice rose. What else did you want? No one answered. Finally, Uche spoke. It started small. Everyone turned toward him. We only wanted. He swallowed hard. To stop you from listening to him. Why? Because. His shoulders slumped. You trusted him more than us. I should have. He lowered his head. If you had. She finished quietly. None of this would have happened. Ada burst into tears. I'm sorry. I never wanted him to become homeless. You still lied. I know. I thought. She couldn't continue. I was jealous. The confession echoed through the room. Mama Ngozi looked shocked. You were jealous? Ada nodded. She had everything. And I wanted some of it. Kayamika closed her eyes. So you took 8 years instead. After a long silence, Kayamika opened the final folder. These are legal documents. Everyone looked up. I've spoken to my lawyers. Uche's face drained of color. Lawyers? Yes. I've already canceled every monthly allowance. Nobody spoke. The houses purchased with my money are being reviewed. The company investments are frozen. The bank accounts I funded have been suspended pending legal proceedings. Mama Ngozi began crying harder. My daughter. I'm not finished. She looked directly at David Ease, who had quietly entered the room with the investigation team. The evidence has been submitted to the authorities. Uche stood abruptly. You can't do this. Kayamika looked at him calmly. I already have. At that moment, Emeka quietly entered the dining room. The family turned toward him. He looked clean, healthy, but his gentle expression remained unchanged. Mama Ngozi immediately fell to her knees. Emeka! He looked at her sadly. I called you Mama for years. Fresh tears rolled down her face. I know. I loved this family. I know. I would have given my life for all of you. Nobody could look him in the eye. He slowly turned toward Uche. I never hated you. Uche lowered his head. I know. You could have simply asked me for help. Instead, his voice broke. You chose lies. The room remained silent for what felt like forever. Finally, Kayamika walked over to Emeka and gently took his hand. Then she faced her family one last time. You didn't just steal money. She looked at each of them. You stole birthdays, anniversaries, conversations, memories. You stole 8 years that we'll never get back. Her voice softened. No court, no prison, no amount of money. She looked at Emeka. Can return those years. The words struck harder than any punishment ever could. For the first time, the family truly understood the weight of what they had done. Not because they had lost wealth, but because they had destroyed the trust of the daughter and son-in-law who had loved them most. Without another word, Kayamika turned toward the door. Still holding Emeka's hand, she walked away. She didn't look back. Some chapters of life are meant to be closed forever. And as the heavy doors of the dining room slowly shut behind them, the family realized that greed had not merely cost them their fortune. It had cost them the love and respect of the only daughter who had ever dreamed of giving them everything. The morning after the confrontation felt strangely peaceful. For the first time since returning to Nigeria, Kayamika woke without the heavy weight of uncertainty pressing against her chest. The truth had finally come to light. The lies had been exposed. The people responsible had confessed. Yet instead of feeling victorious, she felt something else. Grief. She stood by the window of her hotel suite as the first rays of sunlight stretched across the city. Cars moved through the streets below. Shop owners opened their businesses. Children in school uniforms laughed as they hurried along the sidewalks. Life continued as though nothing had happened. But for Kayamika, everything had changed. She had recovered the truth. Now she had to recover the man she had almost lost forever. A gentle knock sounded at the door. Come in. Jessica entered carrying a folder. Good morning. Morning. Jessica hesitated. I wanted to ask. Yes. How are you? Kayamika smiled weakly. I don't know. Jessica nodded with understanding. I suppose healing doesn't happen overnight. No. She looked back toward the window. I spent 8 years believing the wrong people. Jessica quietly placed the folder on the table. You can't change the past. I know. But I can decide what I do with the future. Later that morning, Kayamika walked through the hotel gardens until she found Emeka sitting beneath the same large tree where they had spoken several days earlier. He held a small notebook in his hands. What are you writing? She asked. He looked up and smiled. Just thoughts. She sat beside him. May I see? He hesitated before handing her the notebook. She opened it carefully. Instead of complaints or angry words, every page contained simple prayers. One entry read, Thank you, Lord, for bringing Kayamika safely back into my life. Help me to protect her heart, even if mine still needs healing. Another read, Teach me to forgive completely, just as you have forgiven me. She swallowed hard. You've been praying for me. He smiled. I never stopped. She gently closed the notebook. I don't deserve you. He shook his head. Don't say that. But it's true. No. He looked into her eyes. You made a terrible mistake. She nodded. I did. But mistakes don't erase the years we loved each other. Fresh tears filled her eyes. They erased 8 years. No. He smiled gently. They interrupted them. For the next several weeks, Kayamika canceled nearly every business engagement in Nigeria. Her board of directors protested. Investors questioned her absence. Television stations requested interviews. She politely declined them all. Nothing mattered more than helping Emeka rebuild his life. The first step was his health. She arranged appointments with specialists. Nutritionists developed meal plans. Doctors treated old injuries that had gone unattended for years. A physiotherapist helped strengthen muscles weakened by years of hard labor and poor nutrition. Emeka accepted the care reluctantly. You don't have to spend so much money. Kayamika smiled. You once sold everything you owned for me. That was different. No. She squeezed his hand. It wasn't. One afternoon they visited a tailor. The elderly tailor measured Emeka carefully. What style would you like? Before Emeka could answer, Kayamika smiled. The kind that makes him comfortable. The tailor nodded. Several elegant but simple outfits were prepared. Nothing flashy. Nothing extravagant. Exactly the way Emeka preferred. When he looked at himself in the mirror wearing one of the finished suits, he laughed softly. I hardly recognized myself. Kayamika smiled through tears. I do. You never stopped seeing me. She lowered her eyes. I almost did. He gently lifted her chin. But you didn't. Although his physical recovery progressed quickly, emotional healing proved much slower. Some nights Emeka woke suddenly from nightmares. He dreamed he was back beneath the unfinished building where he had slept. Sometimes he dreamed he was calling Kayamika's phone over and over without receiving an answer. Other nights he dreamed he saw her walking away through the airport, disappearing forever. Each time he awoke, sweating and breathing heavily, Kayamika sat beside him until he calmed down. One night he apologized. I'm sorry. For what? I keep waking you. She smiled sadly. You stayed awake for years praying for me. She gently adjusted his blanket. I can stay awake for you now. Kayamika struggled with her own guilt. Everywhere she looked, she remembered something she had missed. One afternoon she noticed a scar across Emeka's shoulder. What happened here? He glanced at it casually. Oh, one of the cement bags slipped. She closed her eyes. When? A few years ago. She carefully traced the scar with her fingertips. You were carrying cement while I was giving speeches about success. He smiled. You didn't know. I should have. Another day she noticed an old fracture that had healed incorrectly. Why didn't you go to the hospital? He laughed quietly. I couldn't afford one. She turned away so he wouldn't see her crying. Grace arrived from America several days later. The moment she saw Emeka, she walked over and hugged him warmly. It's so good to finally meet you. Emeka smiled. I've heard so much about you. Grace turned toward Kayamika. I told you to trust him. Kayamika laughed through tears. You did. Grace folded her arms dramatically. You should listen to me more often. All three laughed. For the first time in years, the laughter felt genuine. One evening, the three of them sat together watching the sunset over the hotel gardens. Grace eventually spoke. I've been thinking. Kayamika looked up. About what? Forgiveness. Emeka remained quiet. Grace continued. What your family did was unforgivable. She paused. But if you spend the rest of your life carrying anger, she looked at both of them. They'll still be controlling your future. Silence settled over the group. Finally, Emeka nodded. She's right. Kayamika sighed. I don't think I can forgive them yet. You don't have to today, Grace replied. But don't let their bitterness become yours. Those words stayed with Kayamika long after Grace returned to America. As Emeka regained his strength, he slowly returned to the man he had once been. His smile became easier. His laughter returned. He began reading books again. He volunteered at a local community center, helping children with mathematics. The first day he entered the classroom, several children gathered around him. Teacher. The familiar title made him smile. For 2 hours he explained fractions, equations, and geometry with the same patience he had always possessed. When the lesson ended, one little boy hugged him tightly. I understand now. Emeka smiled. So do I. Walking back to the hotel that afternoon, Kayamika noticed the lightness in his step. What are you thinking about? He looked toward the children playing football nearby. I've missed teaching. You still can. He looked at her. You think so? I know so. Several weeks later, Kayamika invited Emeka to dinner. Unlike previous dinners, this one was held in a quiet garden overlooking a peaceful lake outside the city. Candles flickered gently across the table. Soft traditional music played in the background. The evening breeze carried the scent of blooming flowers. Emeka smiled. This is beautiful. She nodded. It is. Dinner passed quietly. They spoke about ordinary things. Books, travel, the children at the community center, future plans. For the first time in years, their conversation felt natural again. When dessert arrived, Kayamika reached into her handbag. Her hands trembled slightly. Emeka noticed. Are you all right? Instead of answering, she stood. Then, to his complete surprise, She slowly knelt beside him. Chi. She looked up with tear-filled eyes. I asked you to promise me something before I left for America. He nodded. I remember. I promised never to stop believing in us. Her voice shook. I broke that promise. She opened a small velvet box. Inside rested a simple gold wedding band. Not expensive. Not extravagant. Just elegant. Exactly like the ring they had exchanged years earlier. Fresh tears filled Emika's eyes. She struggled to continue. I can't erase the past. I can't give back the years we lost. I can't undo the pain I caused. She took a deep breath. But if there's any place left in your heart. She held up the ring. Will you marry me again? For several moments, Emika couldn't speak. The tears finally rolled down his cheeks. You want to marry a homeless man? She smiled through her own tears. No. She gently took his hand. I want to marry the man who believed in me before anyone else did. The man who gave away everything so I could have a future. The man who loved me even when I didn't deserve it. She looked directly into his eyes. The only man I've ever truly loved. Emika laughed softly through his tears. You've always known how to make me cry. She smiled. So, she whispered, is that a yes? He nodded. Again and again, unable to speak. Finally he whispered, yes. The single word carried 8 years of pain, 8 years of waiting, and 8 years of unwavering love. A month later, they stood inside a small church on the outskirts of Enugu. Unlike their first wedding, there were no hundreds of guests, no elaborate decorations, no grand celebration, only a handful of people. Grace had flown in from America. Jessica attended quietly. Several former neighbors came. The elderly woman who had once given Emika rice when he was evicted smiled proudly from the front row. Mrs. Esther, his former colleague, wiped tears from her eyes. The pastor looked at both of them. You have already walked through storms most couples never face. He smiled warmly. And yet, he looked around the church. Here you stand. When it came time to exchange vows, Kayamika spoke first. I once promised to trust you. She swallowed hard. I failed. Fresh tears filled the church. But today, she slipped the ring onto his finger. I promised to listen before believing rumors. I promised to protect our marriage. I promise that no voice will ever become louder than yours in my heart. Emika gently placed her ring on her finger. My promise has never changed. He smiled. I loved you yesterday. I love you today. And if God grants me tomorrow, he squeezed her hand. I'll love you then too. The pastor smiled. By the authority given to me. He looked at them warmly. I now pronounce you husband and wife. Again, the church erupted in joyful applause. As Emika kissed Kayamika, both of them knew something extraordinary had happened. They hadn't simply renewed their wedding vows. They had reclaimed a marriage that lies had nearly destroyed. The scars would always remain. The lost years could never be recovered. But from that day forward, they chose not to let the past define the rest of their lives. Instead, they chose something stronger. Truth, grace, forgiveness, and above all, love that had endured the greatest test of all and survived. 6 months after renewing their wedding vows, the morning sun bathed the city of Enugu in a golden glow. The modest church where Kayamika and Emika had married again was quiet now, but its memory remained vivid in their hearts. Life had settled into a new rhythm, one built not on wealth or ambition alone, but on gratitude, trust, and purpose. Their return to each other had become a story that many people across Nigeria had begun talking about. Some newspapers called it the billionaire and the beggar. Others called it a love that refused to die. But Kayamika and Emika disliked the headlines. Whenever journalists asked how they wanted their story to be remembered, Emika always gave the same answer. It isn't a story about money. He would smile gently. It's a story about choosing truth before rumors and love before pride. Although the public admired their reunion, neither of them allowed fame to distract them from what truly mattered. Every morning, they shared breakfast together before beginning their day. It was a simple tradition, but one they treasured deeply. Years earlier, busy schedules, long-distance calls, and misunderstandings had stolen ordinary moments from them. Now they protected those moments fiercely. One morning, Kayamika laughed as Emika insisted on making tea. "You still put too much sugar," she teased. He pretended to look offended. "I call it optimism," she laughed. "I call it diabetes waiting to happen." He shook his head dramatically. "You've become impossible. And you've become stubborn." Jessica, who had joined them for a meeting that morning, smiled as she watched them tease one another. Months ago, silence had filled every room they entered. Now laughter followed them everywhere. True to his word, Emika returned to teaching. Not because he needed the salary. He no longer worried about money. He returned because teaching had always been his calling. Rather than accepting offers from prestigious private schools, he chose a public secondary school in one of Enugu's poorer communities. Many people questioned the decision. One television presenter asked him during an interview, "Why teach in an ordinary school when your wife owns companies worth billions?" Emika smiled. "Because children don't care how much money you have." He looked directly into the camera. "They care whether you believe in them." His answer spread quickly across social media. Teachers across the country praised his humility. Parents thanked him for reminding people that success was measured by service, not status. Meanwhile, Kayamika gradually returned to managing her international businesses. But she was no longer the same woman who had left Nigeria years earlier. Her board members noticed the difference immediately. During one executive meeting in New York, a director suggested reducing employee welfare benefits to increase profits. Months earlier, she might have approved the proposal without much thought. This time she quietly closed the financial report. "No." The room fell silent. The director frowned. "It would improve our margins." She looked around the table. "Our company exists because people work hard." She thought about Emika carrying bags of cement. She remembered the scars on his hands. "No employee of mine will ever be forced to choose between feeding their family and paying medical bills." The proposal was withdrawn. Another executive later remarked, "I've never seen her lead with this much compassion." Grace smiled knowingly. She finally remembers what success is for. As the months passed, Kayamika and Emika often discussed the years they had lost. Not with bitterness, with honesty. One evening they walked through a quiet park as children played nearby. Kayamika slipped her hand into his. "Do you ever wonder what our lives would have been if none of this had happened?" Emika thought for a moment. "Sometimes." "And?" He smiled. "I think we would have been happy." She looked down. "We lost 8 years." He nodded. "Yes." She expected sadness. Instead he continued, "But maybe those years taught us something we couldn't have learned any other way." "What?" He stopped walking and faced her. "That love isn't just staying together when life is easy." He gently squeezed her hand. "It's choosing each other again after life has tried to pull you apart." She rested her head against his shoulder. "I'll keep choosing you." He smiled. "I know." One afternoon, Kayamika visited the unfinished building where Emika had once slept. She had asked him to stay home because she wanted to go alone. The structure still stood exactly as he had described. Broken concrete, rusted iron rods, dust covering the floor. She slowly walked to the corner where he had spent countless nights. The thought overwhelmed her. She imagined him lying there during heavy rain, cold, hungry, lonely, still praying for her. She quietly knelt on the dusty floor. Tears rolled freely down her face. "I'm sorry," she whispered once again. This time, however, the words felt different. They were no longer words of guilt. They were words of gratitude. Because despite everything that had happened in that place, Emika's kindness had survived. As she stood to leave, she made a silent promise. No one else should have to sleep there because they had nowhere else to go. That evening, she shared an idea with Emika. "I've been thinking." He looked up from the book he was reading. "That usually means you're about to start another company." She laughed. "Not this time." She sat beside him. "I want us to build something together. We already rebuilt our marriage." I mean something for other people. He closed his book. I'm listening. What if we create a foundation? For what? She took a deep breath. A place that helps people who have been abandoned. Scholarships for students whose families can't afford school. Emergency housing for the homeless. Job training. Counseling. Small business grants. She paused. And programs that teach families how to resolve conflicts before they destroy relationships. Emeka smiled. That's a big dream. She smiled back. I learned from the best dreamer I know. He laughed softly. I think we should do it. Within the year, construction began on what would become the Emeka and Kayamaka Hope Foundation. Unlike many charities that simply donated money, their organization focused on restoring dignity. The first building included a temporary shelter for homeless families, a training center where unemployed adults could learn new skills, a counseling unit staffed by therapists and family mediators, a scholarship office for underprivileged students, a legal aid department for victims of financial exploitation and domestic abuse. When reporters toured the facility before its opening, one journalist asked why they had included so many different services. Kayamaka smiled. Because our pain didn't come from only one problem. She looked toward Emeka. It came from poverty, miscommunication, greed, loneliness, broken trust. If we only solve one problem, we've only done half the work. The opening ceremony drew people from across Nigeria. Government officials attended. Business leaders came. Teachers, students, community leaders, former homeless residents, construction workers. Even some of the children Emeka taught at school arrived wearing neatly pressed uniforms. One little girl held a handmade sign that read, "Thank you, Teacher Emeka." Seeing it nearly brought him to tears. When it was time for speeches, Kayamaka walked to the podium first. The audience applauded loudly. She waited until the room became quiet. I stand before you today as a woman who became wealthy. She paused. And almost became poor in the most important way. The audience listened attentively. I believed rumors instead of the man who loved me. I confused success with wisdom. I allowed pride and distance to replace communication. She looked toward Emeka. The greatest investment I ever made was not in business. It was believing in the man who once believed in me. Many people wiped tears from their eyes. Then Emeka approached the podium. Unlike Kayamaka, he carried no prepared speech. He simply looked around the room before speaking. There was a time when I thought my life was over. Silence filled the hall. I lost my job, my home, my dignity, and eventually, he smiled gently. I even lost hope for a while. He glanced toward Kayamaka. But God has a way of writing endings that people cannot imagine. The audience nodded. He continued, if you're listening today and life has knocked you down, his voice became stronger. Don't believe that your current situation is your final destination. Being homeless did not define me. Being betrayed did not define my wife. Our mistakes did not define our future. He smiled warmly. What defines us is what we choose after the pain. The audience rose to its feet in thunderous applause. As the ceremony ended, people lined up to greet them. A young man approached nervously. Sir. Emeka smiled. Yes. I was homeless for 3 years. Emeka listened quietly. I almost gave up. The young man's eyes filled with tears. But hearing your story, he smiled through those tears, made me apply for teacher training. Emeka embraced him warmly. I'm proud of you. Nearby, Kayamaka watched the moment with tears in her eyes. She realized something profound. Years earlier, she had dreamed of changing the world through business. Now she understood that changing one person's life could change an entire generation. That evening, after the guests had gone home, Kayamaka and Emeka stood outside the foundation building watching the sunset. The new sign above the entrance glowed softly in the fading light. Emeka and Kayamaka Hope Foundation. She slipped her hand into his. Do you think your sacrifices were worth it? He smiled. I used to think they were only for you. He looked at the families entering the shelter. the students carrying scholarship applications, the children laughing in the courtyard. Now I realize they were for all of this. She rested her head on his shoulder. I'm thankful God gave us another chance. So am I. After a comfortable silence, Emeka chuckled. What? You know. He looked at her with the same warm eyes she had fallen in love with all those years ago. You still make terrible tea. She laughed so loudly that several children playing nearby turned to look. And you still use too much sugar. They both laughed together as the evening breeze drifted across the courtyard. The pain of the past had not disappeared. The scars remained. The memories remained. The lost years remained. But so did something stronger. Faith, forgiveness, hope, and a love that had survived sacrifice, distance, poverty, betrayal, and time. Their story had begun with a husband selling everything he owned so his wife could chase her dream. It had nearly ended with that same husband begging on the streets while the world celebrated her success. Instead, it became something far greater than either of them had imagined. It became a reminder that true wealth is not measured by bank accounts, luxury cars, or successful companies. True wealth is found in loyalty that refuses to give up, forgiveness that chooses healing over revenge, and love that remains standing even after every storm has passed. And so, hand in hand, Kayamika and Emeka walked toward the foundation they had built, not just with money, but with the lessons of their own brokenness. Behind them lay years of sorrow. Before them stretched a future filled with purpose. And in their hearts lived an unshakable truth. Sometimes the greatest miracles are not the dreams that come true. They are the relationships that find their way back home. Thanks for watching. If you enjoy the story, please subscribe to this channel and tell us where you are watching from.